Yeah, I mean, it's just Luke Ford and the dangers of e-personality. And he's an introvert, incel or whatever. And when he comes out on the internet, he has this, like the dark side of his subconscious becomes conscious. I mean, to me, it's obvious. It's what happens. It's what's happening to you on the same way. But your unconscious, your subconscious is different than Gandalf's subconscious.
Logic and science dictate that not only consciousness doesn't exist, consciousness is in fact scientifically impossible. And yes, it is going to involve math and calculus and science and computer programming. I'm sorry. And that have different implications of the process with the connection between the levels of a person's soul and how it reincarnates.
But I'm not going to spur on the issue because I'm not a woman. It's not my issue.
About how one day you're going to fulfill the Canadian dream or the American dream. So you watch Seinfeld and say, I could do it. I'm going to go out tomorrow and go to work and have a great day, and I'm going to be successful. And one day I'm going to have my own apartment. I'm going to have my own parties with my own friends over. And I'm going to have my own possessions. I'm going to see things that I want and just buy them.
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of yours.
Hello and welcome back to Week in Review with the one and only Doooovid. Very happy to be joined here today by my friend and colleague Doooovid. We talk about a lot of different fun things going on this week. I'm super excited because I finally got, not myself, but a friend of mine got a 3D printer, and I got into the software to print stuff, and I'm getting a periodic table printed. So Chris Elton, yes, that's what the thumbnail is. It's the newly purchased 3D printer. But I'll hand it over without further ado to Doooovid for the introductions. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Yeah, good to be back. It's another week in review. Not sure, mentioned, I think I was on Luke Ford a few times this week. Some interesting conversations. Charles Moskowitz got a little testy on Thursday, like even calling me an anti-Semite. We were talking about Israel's supposed nuclear weapons, I guess the revealed information of the supposed new expansion of Israel's nuclear site, and Biden's letter, supposed the secret letter that the U.S. signs agreeing to not disclose any information about Israel's nuclear weapons program. So that was Thursday, a little better viewership than usual, somewhat exciting. And is it Marshall Laura in the chat?
Hey, Marshall. Hey, John Wolf. Nice to see you, Deshaun, Chris Alton, Vincent, and anybody else I might have missed. Thank you so much for joining us. If anyone wants to join the show today, you're all more than welcome. Doovid sometimes likes to give people a bit of a hard time, but it's all in good fun. I love ideas, and Doovid just loves tradition. So altogether, our intentions are good. It's sometimes a little bit funny, but I know some people have been having some hesitations, trepidations about coming on the show. This is how to think about it. Imagine you're an old person dying. Okay, you're you, but old and dying. And imagine, what regrets you might have. Well, I should think you wouldn't want to have any. So try to get a bit of perspective. It's like, yeah, maybe you say something that's not the coolest thing you ever said in your life, but think of Brundlefly and how badly he assified himself. You are never going to top that. Now that I've said no, someone's never going to top it, someone's probably going to take it upon themselves to top it. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you could easily not quite go that full on off the rails. Back over to you, Doovid.
Yeah, I mean, whatever the likelihood of people of us making the show where just people are going to come on or having these e-personalities, that probably makes it even less likely that people are going to come on, because then they have to consider developing an e-personality. So yeah, unclear how much we're ever going to develop, but we keep at it and, hope that people come or create some sort of, show that make it more likely that people will show up, and, obviously good tidings, success, good things make it more likely for people to take interest. People don't want to get involved in things that are negatively going to affect their life, and are more likely to want to get involved in things that benefit their life. It's to the value proposition. But yeah, the regular streaming this week was supposed to be the return to Root and Branch, and Les actually called me from Israel today, and there might be a delay. I'm not exactly sure. Lowell, I haven't been in contact with him for a few weeks, and so we have to see what's going to happen. But it was the Purim holiday. Root and Branch was supposed to get back to streaming this week. I actually got an email from Lowell this week, the rescheduling of his drama therapist for sometime in April. So we'll have to see what happens, and I hope that it gets back to regular Monday and Wednesday programming, or wherever it is, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this week. Maybe I'll try to do my Ask the Rabbi on the Jewish conception of the soul. Looks like Jennifer had quite a few advancements in her week. I've been reading a lot of books. We got Dishan here. I was reading up on eugenics and Jewish eugenics, and we always, joke about, God forbid, Jews breeding for lighter features. But to see some of the scholarly background to it was interesting. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more. I read some books on the history of racial theory and the conception of race, and I'm still reading on that. It's actually quite interesting. You see what I was saying about the multiple truth hypothesis and anachronization, where when you look at how people understood things in the past, and you want to judge, like wrong, or right or wrong, as opposed to the
word just anachronism, though. So is the verb anachronizing, and then the noun is anachronism? Because I'm not sure. Are you like creating a new word?
That's the intention. Is saying when you judge historical opinions based on the current understanding, I'm saying that that's anachronizing. So if I tell you 300 years ago that there were a few different opinions about the origins of race, and you're like, oh, these ones are right and these ones are wrong because of what we know now, that is anachronizing because you're taking something out of place and time and applying it in the past where it doesn't belong.
I thought it was necessarily a positive rendition of the past.
Anachronism, I
I'm
don't know
just
if it
going to
has a
look it up.
negative connotation. It's usually considered some sort of mistake. Like sometimes it's
Yeah.
purposeful that someone will purposely put something in the past that doesn't belong there as like a literary technique, but usually it's considered a mistake. So if someone's anachronizing, it's going to be a form of like a logical fallacy. That's really what I'm trying to develop it, is like anachronizing as a logical fallacy. And even to something that you regularly do.
Okay, so what's the remedy to? Well, is there a remedy to it?
Well, it's really just a question about axioms and their consequences. So if I'm saying a historical theory, and then you're like, "That's a stupid theory because of what we know today," that you're really that's an anachronization fallacy, and you're applying axioms that didn't exist at the time to something in the past, and it's essentially a logical fallacy.
Oh, okay.
Unless you could demonstrate that the axioms that you're weighing against existed at the time.
And how would you do that?
Well, you'd have to do it through scholarship by demonstrating that, that the person, these ideas were around in this literature, and the person, maybe was even made available and knew about it and rejected it because they were wrong.
Right.
But even still, an anachronizing, even that's still possibly an anachronization fallacy.
It says a thing belonging or appropriate to a period other than in which it exists, especially a thing that's conspicuously old-fashioned. The action of attributing something to a period to which it does not belong. And so it does sound like it has a fallacious connotation, but I do understand. I think I like kind of understand what you're alluding to with regards to a logical
fallacy.
Yeah.
That's just a mix up of axioms. When if I tell you that 1,000 years ago that people believed that Jews got lighter features simply because they moved north, and you're like, wrong. You say like that's an anachronization and saying it's useful.
I don't actually think that's wrong, though. I think that's actually that is accurate. But we don't have to go into that right now.
Yeah, so I'm just giving, like, if you give various theories, and then, I mean, to me, it's almost of no weight. So if someone's like analyzing, like if you're giving like a list of historic theories, and you want to analyze like, I mean, you could do it like and try to give them a truth value, but to assess like right or wrong is largely useless, a waste of time, and that's why I'm trying to create this anachronizing logical fallacy. Also, the understanding that just how narrative and history works and how hard it is to decipher what the truth is, let alone to what the truth was a long time ago, and especially a complicated issue like race, where a lot of these things have changed substantially. We're saying like basically everything that the major sources thought up to 70, 80 years ago is basically wrong. And, from a modern day perspective, but, where do you get looking at the literature and gaining information from, even if you accept that these systems had false axioms, and then, things like structural racism, implicit bias, like the blue-eyed conspiracies, and say that if it's historically true that this explains the current karma, the state of the current karma. Like, say, if the sage of Israel made a decision 1,000 years ago that it's better to be white than black, and that directly led to 1,000 years later, 25% of Jews being basically white. That there was some sort of you could look in the literature, you could see that around this time, the sages of the Jews, you appear to take the opinion that it's better to be white than it is to be dark, and to look at that as an explanation. So say, what was the demography of the Jewish people 1,000 years ago? And say, did less than 1% of the Jewish people in ancient Israel have blue eyes? Was it still less than 1% 1,000 years ago? And then over a certain period jumped to 25%. And you maybe scientifically, you said that, I mean, one, like, who cares? What does it matter? Um, but you said, no, it does matter because that explains the current situation of karma. Because, like, factually, you see, the current allocation of resources and power and wealth that's largely determined by the karma of people's ancestors, and then you could see the ideas and what people thought at the time. And so if it's questioned and to say that that it's wrong, but people thought it was right for 1,000 years, and now they realize it's wrong, and but society was pushed in the direction of this theory because people thought it was right. And that could be racial theory, but evolution could be any mainstream scientific theory. It's like Kuhn's scientific revolutions, like how things change, and then you have to give an anachronizing process because presumably the more correct a person's understanding is, the more correct their understanding of history will be also. So a lot of times, like even my best hits in debates are arguing history because we'll take a concept and then we'll test the concept. So I have this literature also to read about Dayananda Swami from this book I found,
Awesome.
academic book called Aryans, Jews, Brahmins, Theorizing Authority Through Myths of Identity. And it has a little interesting idea that basically the European idea of Aryanism was basically created as a counter-Semitic strategy for anti-Christian Europeans who didn't want to understand their history in the world through Semitic myths, namely the Bible. So they latched on to Aryanism. And then at the same time, you have the revival anti-colonialization move of Indians like the Brahma Samaj and Arya Samaj, where they're trying to say that the secret to India is revitalizing the ancient Aryans. And
I just realized something, Doovid. We haven't done an opening chant /
yeah, I was
song.
still going to do that. This was just my opening of the thoughts I was going to express on the show. And so, yeah, so if that, we did the song last week. I played my Israeli chess friend Yonatan and his dad playing the piano, and I showed his father years ago on the violin in Svat. And that tune that they did in Svat last week that Jennifer had done the screen share is actually an extremely famous tune. And I was thinking, just to mention, it really is the hero's journey and essentially has that 1, 2, 3, 2 structure of the holy name Yud He Vav He in Hebrew of God. And so I thought I'd quickly do that, and then I also wanted to do a Purim song because the Purim holiday was Friday. So if you remember the song last week on the violin, it's a slow song. It's a very nice theme and variation. It's old, like they even sing it at the local modern Orthodox synagogue near me occasionally. I've heard this song basically everywhere, but this one's not even a Hasidic melody. It's even like a Litvish melody, so it's interesting like that. Oh, yeah, 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 mum. I am, oh, yeah, 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 mum. Yeah, 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 yeah. I am, Oi, ni nai 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 na 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 ma ya 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 di dai 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 na di dai dam di dai 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 da 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 ma ya ya ya. Did I na ya maya? Oh yeah, 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 mum. Ah, yeah, 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 yeah. Ah, yeah, mama, yeah, yo. So I probably butchered that one, but I wanted to chant that one that I played last week. So let me do a quick Purim one, especially that we have Vince here. So after the Purim Megillah, the story of Esther and Mordecai was read. Um, there's a few verses that are read, a few like a quick poem called Shoshanas Yaakov, Tzahalav Simcha. A little of the translation. The lily of Jacob rejoiced and was glad when Mordecai was seen in purple. Thou hast ever been Israel's salvation and their hope in every generation, to make known that all who hope in these shall not be ashamed, neither shall any be confounded who put their trust in God. Accursed be Haman, who sought to destroy me. Blessed be Mordecai the Jew. Accursed be Zeresh, the wife of him that terrified me. Blessed be Esther, my protectress, and may Harbona also be remembered for good. So that this one line out of there is a popular song in Jerusalem, and it's also a three-part hero's journey type song, where it says, "To make known that all who hope shall not be embarrassed and shall not stumble forever to all who trust in thee." So this is also a three-part tune. This was very popular in Jerusalem. I had it in my head. I hadn't heard this for years. Um, and the high part, comes to a part where you're even almost like screaming it, like it's meant to drive you up. And like this is a Purim song where people are usually like drunk. So the Jewish celebration in Jerusalem would be like a whole bunch of drunk people on the street chanting this tune on the top of their lungs, and the words like to make known, to hold the goyim, that all who hope in God won't be embarrassed and will not stumble. Loidia, loidia, shikao, koi koi vechu, loyevaishu, veloyechamu, l'neitza kalachoi simbai, loidia, loidia, shikao, koi koi vechu, Loyeshu veloyechamu l'netzach holochaisim boy. Ahoy, leoidia, leoidia, shikal, kal, kal, koivechu. Loidia. Actually, I think I butchered that one up. That one I hadn't heard really since I've been in Jerusalem. It wasn't popular in Brooklyn. It's like the high part. I remember parts of it, but the words Purim, to make known that all who hope won't be embarrassed and will not stumble, which karmatically is a pretty good theme, but in essence, it's kind of like a war tune because it's like Haman lost and Mordecai won. But the tune kind of matches the word and gets the build up, so the person's kind of like yelling at the end, like all who hope won't be embarrassed. With that,
well, that is just a wonderful intention to start the show on, because I know a lot of people struggle with the embarrassment or hesitation of talking, but it's a skill. You have to build it up. If you don't, you become a limp-wristed, sort of jelly-chested equivalent of speaker. Takes solid practice, and even if you spend a month not really talking too much, interacting, you'll find your ability to speak actually does start to get worse. Like, we already have massive degradation of speech quality just on the level of attention. Like, if we were paying attention, we would be balancing our phrasing about 50-50 questions and answers, maybe a little bit heavier on the non questions, like the assertions and stuff. But dialogues are usually, in order to have like the stickiness of a dialogue, you need to ask questions, because that shows that you're actually garnering information from the other perspective, rather than just making assertion after assertion after assertion. And you notice a lot of these combos that happen are more the latter type, which is just like blah 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 blah, list of assertions and then list of other assertions. There's not really any communication. It's more of like rival dictations. And that has a real limit on the amount of intimacy you can derive from it, not in a sexual sense, just the satisfaction of conversational intimacy. It's a big one for self-identity, which longtime viewers of the show will remember that our subconscious or pseudo-conscious or whatever you want to call it is always has an impulse to simulate a sense of self. We're spontaneously drawn towards things that amplify this signal. So I'm very glad that we had that chance to get that chant and associated explanation. Hi, Vincent. I muted you when you first came on. But if you want to unmute, are you still here? Yeah, you're here. I just muted you because Doovid was chanting there. But if you want to unmute.
That's okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, your audio sounds not great. Like maybe like you're on a phone, but we can hear you.
I can switch. Let me switch my audio. Hold on.
Yeah, so I noticed Vincent's done at least 2 streams. And I also noticed, there's a comment before about Doovid telling Charles Moskowitz where it's at. So how was that one? I always tune in. I mean, I'm the biggest fan of the Chuck and Doov show. I mean, there's no substitute for it. It's like borderline musical and it's timber. So how were you feeling? Did you think things took a turn for the worse? Like I know you messaged me right after, but what were your impressions while Vincent gets his audio set up?
You got a little contentious, and Chuck is basically mainstream has Bora in it, and I mean, I think for his own part, like his own audience, I don't think buys what he's saying, and he just keeps on repeating these narratives about what the American people believe, and in my impression, not too many people believe that. The only people who believe that are Jews, and then he's saying that's anti-Semitic, and even basic things like the role of the nuclear program that in my opinion, it is basically the Jewish lobby. That why America supports Israel so much is not necessarily because it's.
How many times do you think he said anti-Semitic?
Well, yeah, so he's taking over the anti-Semitic comrades, and then it's not anti-Semitic. They're saying no, I mean respect money, and it's my point that I've mentioned the whole time. It's the right-wing Jews that have the most power, the ones you have to have a lot of money to be a Republican Jew. Just having hot takes and repeating neoconservative talking points probably is not going to do that much. You really have to have a lot of money and write big checks. And Charles is that's anti-Semitic, and I was Charles, I know what I'm talking about. God forbid, okay, you're right. It's not such a. We probably shouldn't talk about it. But no, I mean, it's not even hidden. That's what we do. We write checks, we get together, we lobby politicians, and we convince them to vote. Related to how we want, and we might want to do it. Say vote like this because it's what's in the best interest of America. But I mean, the reality is no, we lobby these people, and we donate money and we help out their careers, and so the nuclear program where Charles is taking the full straight up yes, even if Israel has nuclear weapons, America should cover it up, should help Israel cover it up because it's the right thing to do, and it's that can't be. I mean, it could be that there's enough Jews in America or a relation, but to claim that that's the right moral thing to do. But he made that argument. And then he it's a pretty weak argument, and then he basically had to call me an anti-Semite, and then I even had to talk straight to the audience where I was don't listen to poor people talk about money. Poor people do not know how these things work. If you had money and you written big checks, if you're used to signing the front of checks, you understand how these things work. If you've never signed the front of checks like that, you might have some sort of speculation or understanding, but no, you're better off listening to people who actually have money talk about these things. And unfortunately, Charles demonstrated the poor man's understanding, and even his streaming, he's not a man of means, God forbid. I'm saying he's not a bad man. He's an author. He's a smart guy. But his opinions and his streaming kind of demonstrate that he's not a man of means. And that's the point I was making, is that you want to be a Jew in the Republican Party, money is the most important factor. But yeah, you could listen to that, and I don't know if Vince has any thought on the the new revelation of Israel expanding the nuclear program, and even to defend that, like from Hasbora, to be like, yes, Israel should be able to have nuclear weapons. They shouldn't have to join the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and America should help cover it up for Israel, of course. And they shouldn't do it because they're doing Israel a favor. America should do it because it's the moral right thing to do. In fact, they should thank Israel just for letting us do it.
Well, I think that Israel is, well, what is Israel's ultimate objective? Israel's ultimate objective is to be the top of the world. So obviously, getting nuclear weapons would be part of that. But as usual, they're not gonna rush, but they also don't want too many people knowing about what they're doing. So it makes sense.
Yeah, it could be that Trump was actually helping Israel expand their nuclear weapons, and Biden pulled the plug, or just generic incompetence that it got out, that under Trump, they were able to expand Israel's nuclear weapons program and largely keep it secret. But after Trump got out of office, it was just too possible to keep it hidden. And we'll see what's going to happen with that. And as the pictures now are coming out that Israel is actually expanding the Dimona nuclear site.
Yeah, well, they want to go up in everything. They have lots, they're at least trying to become, from what I hear, listening to Adam Green, aren't they trying to become the tech center of the world? Isn't that one of their stated goals?
It seems kind of, who cares if, I want to be the best in the world. Whether that's my goal or not, even to look at that's a worthwhile motive to, Israel, wants to be the best in the world. And therefore you could understand the motivations behind their behavior by understanding that they want to be the best. They want to be in charge. I'm not sure how useful that is to, it might play a factor in it, but I don't think that's going to really, at the end of the day, describe that much.
Yeah, well, but it obviously shows that they want more power. If they didn't want more power, they wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure even that I agree that the motivation at all is wanting to be the best.
Well, they want something.
Well, it could to survive that.
Vince, maybe you're just projecting.
Yeah, there's some crazy background. Is that coming from you, Vince?
What does it sound like?
It's just a constant dribble of noise. Now it's not there. Now it's there again.
Hold on. Yeah, there is a noise in my house. It's weird. I can just turn up. Let me go to an area where it's not making that sound. So somebody's going to be making a little bit of sound in the kitchen. How does it sound now?
Well, I guess it's just so just keep yourself muted when you're not talking. So just when you talk, unmute and then immediately mute after if you get the background noise, because we could hear that. And just general streaming etiquette, if you have background noise, keep yourself muted except when you're talking. So let me go straight into maybe reading this Dynand. I'm not sure if Vince has anything new to add to Week in Review from last week. If so, I guess you could add that. Otherwise, I thought it was do some reading, enlightened on some of Dayananda Saraswati's belief in the greater theme of some of the other things we've been talking about. So
thanks, Doooovid. Sounds great.
Okay. So this from this book, Aryan Jews, Brahmins, Theorizing Authority Through Myths of Identity. I think it's a university, SUNY, not the Stony Brook where I went, but I think SUNY Albany. I forget the name of the author. So in chapter 5, we saw the founding of the Brahma Samaj in 1828 by Raja Rammohan Roy, initiated a religious and political movement for the cultural purification of Hinduism. It was his belief that India had strayed from the true model for Indian culture and religion, the ancient Aryans. As a cure for India's political subjugation, he proposed a recuperation of the former Aryan vision and glory. Rama Rohan's method of reading the past is a means of reaffirming or undoing the present set of precedents. Indeed, throughout the 19th century, Indian readings of the Aryan past revalorized ancient Indian history and contributed to social reform. Perhaps the most radical reformer was Dayanand Saraswati, 1824 to 83, who founded the Arya Samaj in 1875. In much the same manner of Rammohan Roy based his reform on the translation and disseminations of the Upanishads, Dayanand developed his notion of the Aryan through a continued rearticulation of the authority vested in Vedic text. Like the Brahma Samaj, the Arya Samaj was a movement that rejected much of what passed as current Hinduism. It based its reform on eradicating differences in language, religion, education, customs, and manners that prevented Indians from fully affecting the mutual good of society as a whole. The 10 principles, niyams of the Arya Samaj, provide a summary statement of Dayanand's position with respect to social reform and ethics. Many of the issues raised in the niyams address ethical concern for the physical, spiritual, and social welfare of others that the Brahma Samaj and Western critics had found lacking in Hinduism. As did Rammohan Roy, Dayanand rejected polytheism and posited the existence of a single abstract God. He also condemned idol worship since his God is formless. He cannot be captured by plastic representation. For both thinkers, the issue of idolatry was emblematic of a degenerate Hinduism as opposed to an earlier pure faith. Both focused on idolatry as a medieval essence towards totally foreign to Aryan religion. By debunking idol worship, both sought to reform Hinduism and return it to its source. However, Dayanand took arguments against idol worship one step further. He asserted that idolatry led to India's political slavery and degradation. By depending on idols and not exerting themselves, Indians had lost their government, independence, wealth, and pleasure. As Dayanand maintained that the Indians themselves were responsible for having become a subject race. In addition to approximating the Brahma Samaj stand on monotheism and idolatry, Dayananda also advocated other issues that were fundamental to Rammohan Rohan's reform: female equality in education, postponing the age of marriage, marriage by choice, widow remarriage. In terms of caste reform, Dayananda far exceeded the efforts of the Raja, while the Brahma Samaj challenged caste with arguments based on Western Enlightenment concerns for social utility. Dayanand condemned caste as a Hindu distortion of Aryan social values. This means for rehabilitation existed and could be rediscovered in the Vedas. It was therefore a question of relying on Aryan solutions to social and religious problems. No foreign inspiration or models for reform were necessary. The Arya Samaj rejected the universalism of the Brahma Samaj, particularly in the later configurations. Rather than accommodating different religious writings, the Arya Samaj challenged scriptural eclecticism. Hinduism was not equal in the brotherhood of religions, but superior to all others. Underlying the Arya Samaj's mandate was its founders' profound belief that modern Indians needed only to return to Aryan values articulated in the Vedas in order to effect reform and regain independence. Since the techniques for a return to the Aryan social system were to be found in the teachings of the Veda, Dayanand based his entire program on these texts. They processed the necessary learning, including all scientific knowledge. Unfortunately, the fundamentals of all types of knowledge do not appear in the Veda in their fully developed form. To access this knowledge, one needed the interpretive skills that Dayananda's readings of the Veda purported to offer. With the Satya Prakash and the Rig Veda Devasya Umika, Dayanand sought to liberate the Veda from Brahmin control, make it accessible to all Hindus, and reveal the Aryan Golden Age. In the following discussion, we will examine how the Satya Prakash and Dayanand's commentaries on the Veda present a series of interpreted strategies enabling him to extricate Vedic revelations from its hermeticism and narrow ritualism and promote a vision of Hindu nationalism that resonates up till the present day. So that's like the first 2 pages of about 10 pages. I'm happy to read through the whole thing if Jennifer and Vince interesting, if you had any comments on just that opening section. And the last chapter was on.
Well, it's just interesting to hear it told through the lens of an Occidental observer. That's for sure.
Just to mention the last.
I don't have any comments in general, but if you want to keep going, I'm definitely interested. Maybe you could read another portion that was approximately the same length, because I know you said the full thing was about half an hour. That might be a bit too long for a week in review, but I do appreciate it.
Yeah, the chapter before was on Rama Rohan Roy, who created the Arya Samaj. So that's why all the comparisons that in many ways, they're considered Hindu reform movement. The first one, the Brahma Samaj, and the second one, the Arya Samaj, and then possibly Ramakrishna, and however you look at the re-rise of Hindu nationalism, that almost all include the famous Ramahan Roy and Dayanand Saraswati. So just to get a little feel of the similarities and differences. Okay, Dayanand's canon and hermeneutical strategies for reading the Aryan world. Vedic textual reference was traditionally known only as memorized utterance. In order to reconstruct a universal system based on the Veda, it was first necessary to fix the revealed text as a written text in the form of a book edition or translation before invoking it as a canonical authority. Ramahan Roy had begun this process by physically disseminating his Veda in the form of vernacular and English translations of the Upanishads. Max Miller continued this process of fixing the Veda with the monumental task of collecting the ancient MSS and publishing the first time the text and commentary of the Rig Veda, the oldest book of the whole Aryan race. Before Dayanand, however, no modern Indian scholar had exhaustively studied the Vedic mantras. Although Hindus paid homage to the Vedas, the Puranas were the scriptures used by the masses and the elites alike. Even for rituals, priests did not rely on the Swaruta Sutras, but on medieval glosses of their commentaries that had been written in Sanskrit. The perception of scriptural value was often more important than content or authorship. Like Ramahan Roy and Max Mueller, Dayanand realized that the Veda authority was contingent upon the text's accessibility, its availability to the public, and its release from Brahmin control. In fact, the entire issue of Vedic authority and canonicity really entailed the liberation of Vedic revelation from its Brahmin appraisers. Witness to the format that Dayanand initially chose for his polemic, the Shastrartha, or book disputation. The most notable book disputation took place in Benares in 1869. Here, Dayanand challenged the Pandits to prove that idol worship had Vedic sanction by demanding that they physically produce a reference. They, of course, could not prove Vedic authority for idolatry. Only the Puranas sanctioned it, and Dayanand's opponents based their claims on this authority. The site and the theme of this book disputations are noteworthy. Dayanand chose Benares, a center for Brahmin learning, as the site to debate idol worship, one of the major sources of priestly pecuniary gain. Although the topic was idolatry, the ensuing debate ended abruptly in the midst of a discussion concerning whether the Puranas were an expression of the same religion as was found in the Vedas. Legend has it that one of the pundits produced some pages containing the term Purana, and while Dayanand was reading them, the pundit declared victory. Dayanand was pelted with stones, and police whisked him away. It is important to note that the debate rested more on the issues of canonicity than on idolatry. Even at this early stage in his career, the book-bound nature of his canon and the physical existence of the Veda were significant factors. At the time, Dayananda focused even more on textual, grounded Vedic authority. Throughout his career, he consistently emphasized the legitimacy of physically present text. After he abandoned the medium of the book disputation and public debate, he focused his attention on translation and commentary. Through these efforts, Dayanand established a canon for which he could create a portrait of an idealized monotheistic Aryan world devoid of idolatry. Dayanand's initial task consisted of identifying a canon of authority. In an innovative move, Dayanand limited the Vedic canon to include only the Samhita portion of the Vedas. It was a curious move on his part to posit the Vedic Samhitas as a sole authority, since they were historically viewed as ritualistic texts. Dayanand, however, insisted that the Samhitas be read exclusively in order to gain knowledge relevant to life. Since the Vedas alone were considered divine in origin and other texts were composed by seers, Dayanand deemed that whatever was found in any text contradicting the Veda must be rejected, and the only texts composed by God, they alone, were infallible. Other texts depended on them for their respective authority. By delimiting his canon in this manner, Dayanand sought to discover the earliest strata of religion in its purest form. The movement back to the earliest text predating any and all practices provided an impregnable position from which to launch an attack on contemporary abuses. Regarding the rest of Hindu scripture, Dayanand only considered those texts written before the Mahabharata War and Vedic Golden Age, the Arsha literature, as authoritative. While this corpus contains some error, since it was composed by humans, Dayanand judged it valid to the extent that it reflected God's knowledge as manifest in the Veda. He judged the Anarsha text Those written after the Mahabharata war devoid of authority and unworthy of study. They may contain some truth, but is hidden under much falsehood amidst a lot of rubbish myth and fabrications. Given the fact that Dayananda clearly denied these texts that he viewed as authoritative, it is interesting to note the extent to which he held to his evaluation of textual legitimacy and adhered to his pre-established canon authority. Dayanand scholar J.T.F. Jordans compared the first and second editions of Satya Prakash and discovered that in the first edition, Dayanand provided few Vedic references to support his portrait of the Aryan world. It was only after the long and arduous work of the Veda Bhashya that he compiled the second edition and cited the Vedas more frequently. In both editions, Dayanand also relied heavily on the Manu, the principal Upanishad, and the 6 schools of philosophy. An exhaustive statistical analysis of Dayanand's use of source material, J. Lellenwolf has further shown to what degree Dayanand relied on Arsha literature when the Samadhi portions of the 4 Vedas did not offer sufficient material to substantiate an idealized vision of Aryan reality. Lellenwolf has quantified the extent to which Dayanand based his portrait of the Aryans on a limited Vedic canon supplemented by alternative authorities from the Arsha literature that were not Vedic as Dayanand defined it, but could be used canonically in conjunction with the Veda to support argumentation. In order to develop a full theory of polity, for example, Dayanand relied primarily on Manu. Expediency overrode his self-imposed canonical strictures. The important point in this regard is that textually Dayanand's Vedic world was no more Vedic than Rama Mohan Roy's translation of the Upanishads. Moreover, in order to read this Veda in support of an idealized vision of the Aryan world, Dayanand devised a series of hermeneutical ploys that further facilitated his thesis that the Vedas embody a totality of truth. Lellenwolf has shown how, in general, Dayanand was not truly consistent in his use of citations. References to source frequently did not even follow the authority quoted. In the great majority of cases, Dayanand presented his own interpretation of the Vedic passage without any references to supporting material. When he chose to support his readings, he prominently featured non-Vedic Arsha text, noteworthy for the interpretive flexibility. Dayanand also allowed himself considerable freedom through an impressionistic treatment of verbs. In the Veda, if the Veda was indeed timeless, Dayanand felt justified in changing verb tense or person to fit his interpretation because God's knowledge is internal and infallible. The relation of words, letters, and meaning remained the same in the past and the future, according to Dayanand. Thus, Dayanand could easily transform the past into the present. Semantic contortions allowed him to render historical events or geographical features into statements of principle. The latitude that such tinkering afforded his translation cannot be overstressed. It virtually liberated his authoritative reading of the ultimately canonical text from any bonds of textuality. However, Dayanand's most effective strategy for reading the Veda to support his argument was to be found in his fanciful etymologies and translations. Creative etymology allowed Dayanand to draw his rather broke conclusion that the Aryans possessed sophisticated scientific data regarding air filtration and water purification techniques, the science of aeronautics, and techniques of medicine. Grammar and semantics were enlisted to support Dayanand's unique notion that the Vedas were the repository of all scientific truths. Creative translations also allowed Dayanand to reveal the Aryans' historical commitment to social progress. The WiR Veda text 2010 is literally translated, "I take my stand on princely power and kingship." Dayanand renders this passage, "I live in a kingdom which is administered righteously and in a country which is awakened to the widespread literacy and morality." 2 sentences later in the same passage, the Sanskrit could be rendered thus: "I stay on welfare on upper regions and earth, and I recline on sacrifice," to which Dayanand offers the following reading: "Those who carry on duties of government regarding me as their supreme lord achieve always triumph and progressive prosperity. All government officials therefore should strive to enlighten the people with knowledge and justice, and should protect them so that injustice and ignorance may be uprooted." Great translations also allowed Dayanand to reveal the Aryans' commitment to scientific progress by proving Aryan knowledge of telegraphy and modern chemistry. Reading the results of scientific investigations into the Vedas may well have functioned as a strategic ploy aimed at diffusing the modern encroachments of scientism or attacking the scientific pretenses of modernism. However, Dayanand's linguistic flights of fancy also served a serious practical purpose. They were directed in service of religious reform. Broad translations enabled Dayanand to draw his most significant conclusions regarding Aryan religious belief. A free rendering of the term pratima as measure rather than idol or image, allowed Dainan to confirm that the Veda actually prohibits image worship. Morphosynthetic switching allowed Dainan to affirm the existence of Vedic monotheism. Although Dainan ascribed 10 separate meanings to the term deva, he concluded that in no way referred to a multiplicity of divinities. In this manner, Dainan's reading of the Veda supported his critique of Hindu polytheism and idolatry, constant themes in his texts on traditional beliefs and practices. In other words, Dainan's interpretive strategies established a hermeneutical structure that foreclosed all competing value systems, scientific, religious, and finally historical. The Veda eternally existed prior to all history. It cannot therefore relate to any particular event or individual. Those individuals where the Veda seems to refer to proper names or events actually express statements of principle or injunction clothed in dramatic or poetic form. Moreover, the Veda cannot contain anything that offends reason or morality, such as miracles or myths. Seemingly supernatural or historical events must be interpreted allegorically. Names, particularly the names of various gods, can indicate several senses. Only in short, Dainan used a shallow Veda or alternate canon miscitations, creative etymologies, and mistranslations to support his central thesis of the Veda's universal applicability and usefulness as a postmodernist tool for reform. This methodology had a far-reaching implication. It ultimately allowed for him to mythologize history and demythologize myth. Dainan's vision of text-centered authority has his delimitation of the canon and the hermeneutical strategies he devised enabled him to attack the very type of religion that Brahmins identified as Vedic and Dainanda deemed false and superstitious. His creative method of reading also challenged the modernists represented by the Brahmo Samaj and Indian scholars who felt were under the spell of Western ideological presuppositions. The layer of deception were manifold. Indian modernists depended on Western scholars who in turn had fallen prey to Brahmin falsehoods in the form of traditional Sanskrit commentaries. Dainan thus rejected the authority of traditional exegesis in the form of scholiasts and commentators, as well as modern yet traditionally trained scholars both at home and abroad. After rejecting all competing exegetical authorities, his canon interpretation alone remained valid. Beyond opposing a personal idiosyncratic reading of the canon as he defined it, Dainan's strategy for reading presented a serious attempt to liberate the Veda from the limited readership of Brahmin priests and the pundits who controlled access to the text. Rammohn Roy had first sought to liberate the text by redefining access to it through translation. By rejecting traditional and contemporary readings, Dainan directed his effort to the same end, freeing the text from Brahmin reading and bequeathing it to a more general public. Rammohn's efforts had
Probably a
been
good
limited.
idea to wrap up just for now because it's probably too much information for people to really take in at once. But yeah, we lost Vincent and probably like half the audience there. But thanks. I was interested in hearing
It
that.
goes on. The next section is actually on Aryan masculinity and the theological of decay and that's the last section, I guess, on Dainanda. But yeah, it's pretty interesting for especially Jennifer, people who are familiar with Dainanda Saraswati and this.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that said there was linguistics flights of fancy. That sound familiar at all?
Yeah, and it's interesting that this scholar, the event, ran a computer statistical search on the sources that he quoted and the words and the translation. So it's I don't mind reading through the rest of it, but yeah, I thought that it's an interesting that what the Aryan. So I didn't finish the book, but in the beginning part of the book, mentioned like in Germany and the rise of Aryan in the West is basically an attempt to get away from the Semitic origin theories, and that say maybe the origins of us are the Aryans, and the Aryans are corroborated by evidence, namely Vedic ancient scripture. That all these people who think that the Semitic origins and the Bible is the foundation for the West, and so they're taking this concept that largely had recently been coming to Europe through the Vedas of the Aryans and applying it to an understanding of the history of the white man. And at the same time, India at that period in the 1800s is at its lowest state ever, is trying to reform and be a free and independent Hindu India, that they try to model themselves on an ancient culture and an idealized ancient culture. So, in like Israel, almost like Zionism, revitalizing Israel based on the Bible and this supposed like ancient better Israel where things were better, and the same thing of Ram Rohan and Dayananda Saraswati, that is postulating that there was this perfect ancient Aryan civilization where they lived according to these principles, and then that was corrupted, and the Vedas were lost or subjugated to the control of corrupt Brahmins, and by revealing the true meanings of the Vedas and making them accessible to the masses, the Dayananda Saraswati would be able to revive India and humanity by reviving the this true spirit of this hypothesized ancient Aryan people that obviously are not the Aryan invasion theory, of the false theories of the West, but the actual Aryans that
I
are.
mean, that is what the Aryan invasion theory is about. It's about Europeans trying to take credit for what the Aryans did. That's essentially what it is, but it's still referencing the same Aryas because it's like, oh wow, who are all these ancient people who made all these crazy like advanced buildings and had all this knowledge in their depictions
It's
and
funny that
engravings and stuff.
this author expresses it as the Europeans trying to basically wrestle the narrative away from the Jews.
By
So this,
stealing someone else's history.
Dorothy Figueroa, so she might be Italian, but yeah, saying at that point the European narrative was basically the Jewish narrative, that the Europeans were completely subjugated to the Jewish narrative, and it's hard to just kind of create your own narrative. And so these alternative narratives that could have been like, look, the Bible and the Jews were wrong the whole time, really the origins of humanity is something else, and here's this new evidence that's not really new, it's ancient, from the Vedas. So why are we going to give your authority to the Bible and the Jews when there's more ancient evidence that seems more compelling of the Aryans?
Yeah, but I just don't think that's the irony of it, is that the Germans as ancient Aryans is not a compelling narrative, because it's like there were German tribes in the time of Rome that were described as barbarians. Now, I'm not saying they were fully, horrible people, but it's like
So
they're
it's not
trying to
like,
invent a memory. It's very sad.
yeah, so Dayananda Swami has, I mean, it's not really even like a Garden of Eden. I mean, it's like basically an ancient civilization.
It's a creation myth. Well, you could call it a myth. So basically, there's like a Sapta Rishi, 7 rishis that the Veda was revealed to, which is like described as the song of God, and God as the universe type thing. So it's like a short form of universal knowledge. That's the basic, and you could call that a creation myth or a foundation myth, but that's the basic idea.
Yeah, I mean, from the
Sapta Rishi.
cosmology of the creation of the world to this, original or period where there's somewhat like a perfected Aryan society where people live righteously in accordance
I don't
with
think they describe it as an Aryan society, because I think in the Veda, Arya is a quality. So you compare Arya with Dasu, and that
yeah,
there's sort of
I would have read that. It's in
qualities.
the chapter, all the stuff that the more about Dainan's theology of that is in the chapter, but just for the purpose to people who research, they get a greater understanding of the connection between the European Aryan and the Indian Aryans, where
The connection is that the Europeans are trying to steal the history that rightfully belongs to the Indians
I mean,
because
you're
of
applying a motive.
reasons.
I mean,
Well,
is it
that's
really an inaccusation that, I mean, saying, okay, because I mean, as I said, the author said that that it was an attempt to get out of being subjugated to Jewish authority. But you could give a bunch of motives and reasons, but it's saying that the Vedas, and specifically in the time of the Samajas, that there's an attempt to restore India to a former greatness of the Vedas and this concept of the ancient nobles, the ancient Aryans that according to Dinan wasn't a race. There were good doers and bad doers, but the ancient Aryans were the ones who upheld the principles of what would have created or made a benevolent society, and that was still possible today. So that even conceptually what Dionanda understood the ancient, so to say, Aryans to be, or this is up for dispute among scholars. And then the like a European basis to say that okay, we're rejecting the biblical narrative, Noah and the 70 nations and the Tower of Babel and the Exodus and all these stories about the ancient Israelites, and they want a different cosmology. So the European cosmologies usually postulate, like Atlantis or the Greek mythology, that there were gods, there were deities, and that humans are the result of the deities, as most Hindus. So Dionand was really going against a possible interpretation of Hinduism, say the deities are real. In ancient, the ancient supposed like Aryans, that it wasn't uprighteous men that were Aryans. You're saying there were actual deities who walked the planet, and those are the gods that we worship. The deities are in fact real, and so that interpretation of European paganism is almost universal. Alexander the Great, is a descendant of the deities. Almost everyone in the ancient and Greek world of note claimed to be a descendant of the gods, where the gods and humans interacted. And so revitalization of European Aryanism, where the gods and man interact again post-Enlightenment, is pretty unlikely. So, rather to take this Aryan model where there was this ancient people who were by race naturally enlightened, or some, according to Dionand, because they properly followed the proper scripture, were enlightened, to some sort of perversion that it was really an ancient race that was enlightened by factor of being members of a given race, which is also, God forbid, like a Brahminization. It's also a Judaization. So instead of basically,
yeah, the Nazis are embracing a Judaization of Hinduism, which is the
they're basically
it's
saying,
the
like,
irony of
Jews.
the irony of all time. Yeah, it's the irony of all time. It's like, when will this end?
The Jews aren't the real Jews. The Aryans are the real Jews, and the Aryans aren't the real Aryans because we're the real Aryans.
Oh dear. It's
like,
fast
of course,
reaching the maximum entropy state.
Eyes. Of course, if there was an ancient tribe of enlightened people, of course there would have been blue-eyed people.
Well, of course, that was the predicting factor, blue eyes. I mean, that was the first line they wrote down. I mean, there's even intentional, deliberate mistranslations of these scriptures to give that, to allude to that lighter skin somehow means that you're Arya. It's just such a hilarious. It just sort of shows that if that's the only thing people can reference, that's all they know about it. Just sort of shows just how warped their perspectives are. Like they don't care. Like, look at the audience numbers. Like, people, okay, they're coming back now, but they were down to 10 for a while. It's like people like to pay lip service to these things, but they don't actually have enough attention span or care enough to like actually understand the history of it, which is super important, because if you go to if you're approaching a problem like consciousness, and this is just going to keep happening until people accept the right theory, and you sort of, don't do a historical review of how other people have understood consciousness throughout the ages, you're going to misunderstand the problem to some extent, and you're going to end up saying something that sounds, NPC tier, like, well, it's just obvious what consciousness is. It's not obvious at all. It's obvious. I think we could probably agree, if we're starting from scratch, that we have consciousness. But some people disagree even that animals have consciousness. So if you can disagree on that level, it's obviously not clear as to what constitutes consciousness, is it? So, yeah, it looks like Ricardo's in the chat complimenting you yet again on your awesome performance there. At some point, it was over for Chuck. That's true. You know, it was so bad that my like memory sort of erased it because of my extreme empathy. It's like I kind of feel bad for Chuck after that. So I
Yeah,
almost don't remember it, but I know that it happened.
he's not really capable of analysis. It's kind of like pure moralizing. And they're just saying like, let's just do analysis, but you can't do analysis because every other thing like this is good and this is bad and this is what moral people do. Is like let's just analyze the possibilities, and there's too many possibilities to even bother giving moral statements on the possibilities. Like it just gets in the way, and probably why he's not capable of doing it. So on the issue, then like a complicated issue like Israel's nuclear program, he just comes out as like Hasbora is like, you should only be so lucky to dedicate your life for Israel and get nothing in return.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, it's like it sucks to get triggered emotionally and be like, "What? What do you mean?" Da, 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 in a debate, but it's almost worse to get stuck in an NPC loop where it's like you could sort of see it was like a throw new recognition error exception, and he just sort of went into the anti-Semitism loop, and he's
I mean,
like,
things.
is
I mean,
like,
I
well,
honestly
that's an
think like
anti-Semitic. He said that's an anti-Semitic canard so quickly that when Luke replayed it at double speed, it was like, that's how it came across. It was anyway. There's no words for it. Sorry, I failed.
well, no, saying there's words for it. Like it's describable, it's predictable. Jews are going to Jew, and it's another one of his fallacies when he said that like his like I'm a Jew, I could tell anti-Semitism, which is basically a logical fallacy. Like no, and then he he's pointing like blacks, like just like because he doesn't think blacks could measure whether there's racism or blacks, that he thinks they're biased, but him as a Jew, and even kind of like a duplicitous, like I get to pretend like I'm white, not a Jew. But if while pretending like I'm not Jewish, I catch you for a second doing anything anti-Semitic, I will return and become super Jew. And that's like a little bit of a nature because I'm pretty consistent in my Judaism, as opposed to a lot of people who basically pretend that they're not Jewish the majority of the time. So then when they talk about Judaism, have to become like super Jew, because like if me and Charles met each other in public, he would probably be pretending he's not Jewish. So like when we're actually talking about Judaism, he's like, I'm the super Jew, not the, like unlike you, who's just a mediocre Jew, even though if we met in the public square, the average person would never even think that I was Jewish.
Some sort of like quantum Jewishness interference type of thing. I'm sure
Yeah,
that
these
there's
trends
a
are so
theory for that.
predictable that they're kind of identity with all people. So the issues that cause Jews to have identity issues like that are probably universal issues of consciousness, where like a dual identity person who has a membership like in a cult or a religious group, and then their larger identity of work and friends and social economic status, that a lot of times they're dual identities, that the people they deal with in a religious setting are not the people they deal with day to day, and they have completely separate personalities. So the dissonance is saying like that on both ends, that one aspect of the personality has to be serving the other. So and it usually works both ways. That so if you're talking to a Jew who tries to hide that they're Jew in the business world, and ask them about their Judaism, and during business they'll downplay their own Judaism, or talk about it keeps them disciplined, or connections in the same, like if you find them in their Judaism talking about their social economic world, where it'd be like, everything I do is so that I can leverage that benefit for the sake of Israel, and you should also. And that's really a common understanding of identity. But this question that like Jennifer, that I don't know, that does can a Jew have a special sense of whether it's anti-Semitism or not, or is it irrelevant? Like does Charles can he smell anti-Semitism? And you should believe him. Like, I'm a Jew.
Well,
And
I
can
mean,
tell
like,
there's
I mean, it's
anti-Semitism. Or you say, like, that's a pretty logical fallacy. Like, I need some sort of evidence besides for, like, I'm a Jew and I know.
can you tell if someone doesn't like you? I think you can. Okay, here's what I think. Like, yeah, you can get a sense when somebody has like a bad feeling, and like you can profile them for a while, like, if they don't like you. But like, no, I don't know that you can really tell what direction that like, because it's not directional. It only becomes directional on the level of like the last level of consciousness when you're articulating things, right? So it's not direct. Like, it would be easy to get a false positive with something like that, because it's like let's say I have PMS or whatever. Sorry, bad example. Whatever, gross or whatever. Sorry, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. It's like, ugh, and then it's like I'm just mad at the world, right? I don't hate anybody. It's just like I feel like shit, right? So it's you get it. You very easily get a false positive, but obviously there's some type of like recognition mechanism where you're in touch with the undifferentiated state of other people's consciousness through some type of what you could call like a biological level organism, where it's like a pack herd mentality type thing of sensitivity. But in terms of like going from that to then you hate me and I'm sure about it, no, I don't think anybody can really do that. But I think for sure, like if somebody doesn't like you IRL, I'm sure you've had this where somebody just like, you realize after a while, it's like, this person just has an issue with me for being, me. It's just like friction, right? At that point, you could generally surmise that they don't like you. It would be foolish to surmise otherwise. I don't know if that's a
I
good
used to
enough
joke
answer.
that all the time and say, like, yeah, I used to think that people just didn't like me because I was Jewish, but maybe it's my personality. And
To be honest, I like you. I like you a lot because you're very predictable, and that's what I love in people is like a predictability because it's comforting to me. But I'm also like there's some people that really don't like me, and I think it's a level of dissonance, right? Because you like driving to lower dissonance. Most people wanted to drive to higher not to higher dissonance, but to resolution of a dissonance that's not creating more dissonance. Like you don't mind resolving dissonance by creating more.
it just
And
comes to a point
neither
where
do I. Because that's the like Leela of Krishna, where it's like, I'm having fun even though I feel like a dumbass or whatever. It's like do. Hard to put it into words, but yeah,
well,
that's
to
like
me,
a
it's just straightforward logical, and it even makes me like downplay Jennifer's IQ that it's not that straightforward logical, but it's just a pattern. And if people don't neatly fit in the patterns, that they're going to put the things that don't fit in probably in bad piles. So they see Jennifer, and whatever reason they don't fit into their prescribed patterns, she's going to go with the weirdos or the bad ones, and that's how all people naturally think. And like whatever the person's identity, whatever the patterns that people have, and that's the dissonance mechanism that you need to recognize patterns to understand the world. And when you see information that you can't process, you could try to block it, and then you need a dissonance mechanism to help you block it. And so people create dissonance blocking mechanisms, which are basically discounting factors. I was reviewing some of my streams with the cognitive dissonances say to discount the conflicting input that's causing the dissonance. And so you do that by saying that I have a bunch of falsely recognized patterns of how the world works, and every time I could bump into Jennifer Doooovid, it just caused me a bunch of dissonance because I see that the patterns that I thought I recognized were false. So the person could just be like, no, it's not because of that reason. It's because these people are bad. And that's the natural human mechanism of all people.
yeah, you're talking about a simplistic moral binary where it's like not gonna figure it out, just gonna ascribe bad, gonna turn away.
Discount's a pejorative, that you have to discount things that cause you dissonance, and discount is pejorative. So if
I wouldn't say
Jennifer
pejorative.
cause you dissonance, we have to be discounted so that we take up less of a person's consciousness. So
well, that's not so much of a problem for me.
Discounts us but the discounting has to be this person's not important, and whatever their opinion or thinking or causing that their patterns not to coincide with the ones I'm currently seeing, it's their fault, not mine.
I haven't really had so many setbacks of that because I can go one step further and anticipate their low level of cognition and respond. I'm not talking to them expecting a reflection. So I don't really have, but sometimes like there is this certain archetype of man who's like, I don't want to say meathead, but more on the meathead side and like loudmouth who gets ultra intimidated by me. And it's just like a pattern that these guys, no matter how much I am, benign in my own attempt to be benign, there's just no way to get them not to get their feathers ruffled. But that's a minority of people, luckily. Like, it's not like it happens every day.
Well, whatever the period of position that you'd be in, the dissonance that you'd cause, that would need to be discounted.
Well, but the dissonance is just what? Sorry, I'm not sure I understood what you just said.
Dissonance is discounted. That's the way people deal with dissonance, is by discounting it.
Well, the source of the dissonance is denied. Yeah,
discounted, not denied.
Well, the mechanism, like you have to think of it like a spring. So denial is when you push it away, which is like, yeah, there's two ends of it.
You can't push away stimulus like that. I'm saying that.
Well, yeah,
I did it on my stream. If you want to discuss it, we can. But the term is discounting. That's how people respond to the source of the dissonance. Discounted, because you can't necessarily mute the source of the dissonance. You have to discount it. So if it's like Jennifer Doooovid, you might be able to mute us or void, but usually you're like Jews or some of these issues, like the Jews are constantly going to come up. You're constantly going to have to deal with Jews, so you could discount it, but you can't really, you could try denying it, but and even denial is probably a discount.
I think the word that most people would use, I think, would be ignore. And that's on my blog when talking about how people deal with dissonance.
The reason why the word is discount. I'm saying it's not like you don't get a choice in the matter. The word is discount. And
well, according to who? According to who? Discount sounds like a cash machine going ka-ching. I got a coupon. I want a discount. And get like 10 cents off a jug of milk or something. Well, why is discount
the scientist who came up with the theory and saying discount is because it's the mechanism that's necessary for the mind to do that it's not denied, it's discounted.
Okay.
And discounting meaning like timesing it by like a 0.1. So saying if someone has their patterns and then they see Jennifer and they feel the power of her patterns affecting their patterns, and they come up with a discounting mechanism, and it's like timesing Jennifer times like 0.01. And that could be done through a denial, because she's been discounted, and it's numerical. It's like she doesn't matter because of this discount. And mathematically, it's a discount can be represented mathematically as like timesing by a weighted factor to minimize to discount the influence.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's cool. So
it leads
Ricardo's
to mathematization of these ideas, where you say discounting because you could have a varying methods. Maybe denial is 100% discount, as opposed to calling you crazy.
Well, it's 100% is impossible. It's a sphere. Remember, it's spherical coordinates, so it would be like 0.0001. You could go to whatever limit of 0.0-ness, but you can't go to actual zero.
Well, is it like she doesn't exist? Like whatever reason you thought you saw or heard this woman, you were wrong. She doesn't actually exist.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot of people out there.
Full denial to just saying like, oh, this woman's crazy. You could discount everything that she says, anything that she said.
And you know what, Doovid? I want to tell you
corresponded with one of your patterns doesn't matter because she's crazy.
I want to tell you a secret, Doovid. In order to make the NPCs feel a bit better about themselves, I actually act a little bit kooky, just so that they can feel better about themselves when they call me crazy. Because I know that it's just like they're not on the level to be cool enough to like sink their teeth into this stuff, and it just makes me feel sorry for them, honestly, because it's like my teeth are glistening.
You don't have a really clear way to handle the dissonance of your detractors. So like my mechanism, like dissonance, may be better. It's like, of course you hate me. Of course you want to kill me. And in fact, God didn't send you. God is the cause of why you hate me. And in fact, God himself is the one who sent you to kill me. You're saying like a distance. Like I don't have to discount the fact. Like no, it makes perfect sense to me that you hate me and want to kill me. In fact, I know that God's the one who sent you to do it. No dissonance.
For me, it's all about the person because to me,
You
I
still
feel
have like some distance. You're like, oh, why does this person hate me? You're saying because
No.
God sent them to hate you and kill you. Of course. Why does that cause you dissonance?
I've had people who've hated me for as long as I can remember, so it doesn't cause dissonance when somebody hates me. No, it's expected for people to get their feathers ruffled. I thought you meant more how I responded to it, and I
Yeah,
was
I'm
saying
saying
it's a
that-
person, it's individual, it's relative to that person. I sort of improvise a strategy based on what that person is. Why are they attacking me? Because there's a reason that has nothing to do with me that they're doing it for.
Yeah, I mean, that's the enlightened monotheism. It's not them attacking you, it's God attacking you.
I would say that it's them lashing out at themselves through me, because there's like a self-loathing that's repressed or discounted self-loathing. If you want to be using your words, and then I have this
That's
psychic
not my word. That's
clarity.
the scientific terminology of cognitive dissonance theory. That's why I'm using the word discount. It's not my term. It's the term of the theoreticians of cognitive dissonance, the scientists who, not Festinger. I have to look at my name to see the names of the various terms, but I'm using the terms of the psychologists who develop the theory.
Yeah, so in that terminology, it would be somebody to the effect of I amplify. What's the opposite of discount? Amplify, or is there a word for it?
I have to look it up. But, I mean, I don't think there is. I don't think you can amplify. I don't think there dissonance. The source of dissonance is discounted. Like, I don't think there is. I mean, there might be an amplification type thing, but it's like no. It's when you have dissonance and you locate its source, you discount it.
Okay. Yeah, Ricardo was asking before how to deal with the craziness of Claire is just don't take the bait mostly, and understand that it's very important to Claire that things make sense, and she really wants people to be predictable. And I think that that's probably a relatable feeling. It's just that Claire settled on an approach that doesn't transcend the full causality. We all want to have a model. Doovid's got his multiple truth hypothesis. We all kind of want what Claire wants, but we're not all ready to settle on Claire's reductionist, simplistic binary morality for a variety of reasons, and that's frustrating. But it's just really a matter of not taking the bait and not letting her advance progress the conversation in such a way that you're getting on the defensive. But I mean, why talk to Claire? I mean, unless it's to develop your own debating rhetoric.
Well, so that's my point about your bad karma, because like Claire is your dissonance, and you can't discount her. You have to keep on dealing with her because she's right there.
Why do I need to? Why would Claire cause me dissonance? She's funny. I see Claire as a plus on me. It's like, look how pathetic my opponents are. They were pathetic in my last life, and they're a gajillion times more pathetic now, and it's funny. And I'm going to go and have some fun because I enjoy fun.
Yeah, but I mean, that's probably just complete fallacy because in reality, Claire is about your equal.
Oh, is she?
And only among you and a small subset of your followers do you think you've won. And it's just like, if you want to consider like Hinduism versus Islam or any of these things, like, only in your dreams are you winning the battle. You have your fantasy of, thinking that like Hinduism is going to defeat Islam. But that's in your dream and your fantasies. That's your dissonance. There's like, of course, Hinduism has already defeated Islam. It's not even like it's a question. I'm considering that battle done. Just completely discounted that dissonance like it didn't even exist. It's like, no, Islam's still there. Most people don't think you won those arguments, and so Claire is just representative of that larger dissonance block of multiple factors.
Her refusal to debate me with a moderator, that's also indicative of my dissonance.
Probably. I mean, it's reciprocal.
Isn't that more her being afraid to debate me without a moderator? Isn't that more what it says? I mean, I'm not afraid to debate someone with a moderator. I think a moderator is a better debate.
But it's really a sign of your own incompetence. They're saying that Claire.
I think it's a sign of incompetence that the only way you can win a debate is by talking over someone and talking for too long and interrupting with asinine questions that should have been known the answer to if one was going to be in that debate realm in the first place.
Yeah, but Claire is your bad karma. Claire is your misfortune. That the fact that you're debating, you're talking with Claire.
Well, if you want to see it that way, you're more than welcome to.
I mean, it's really the principle of monotheism in general. Like all voices are basically are factually the voice of God. Even negative voices, all actions are willed in essence by God. So if you're hearing these voices from Claire, to a certain extent, Claire is representative of the voice of God.
Yeah.
And so,
okay. A really pathetic God.
Well, no, so you're talking in heresy. So you're saying, okay, Jennifer has bad karma, so God is talking to her in the voice of Claire. In order for her to have God talk to her in a better way than the voice of Claire, she has to fix her karma.
Or Claire has terrible karma and a liar and a fraud, and Jen has good karma so she can identify people with bad karma and then expose them for who they are and do the public a service of not, confusing people who are already pretty probably.
Yeah,
confused.
there's no. I mean, you sound like Adam Green or something or Charles Moskowitz. Like I did some service by exposing people.
Well, you're trying to moralize it.
Like the whole time, I never even liked Jennifer. I was just trying to expose her for 2 years. I've been talking to her, pretending like I liked her, took her ideas seriously, and really, I was just trying to expose her so that people would know how not to act. Ha ha ha.
Well, that's basically what Claire is saying, isn't it?
Well, that's what you're saying. You're saying Claire. I mean, but it's saying Claire is your bad karma. That you're saying like, I mean, God forbid. Like, I've worked with many cults of different kinds. I've helped people open up centers. I've seen preachers that went out, and when the only people who come to your programs you hate, you're not going to be successful in building up a program. And so that's when you're and so we look at how's the program going? Like, well, few people show up. It's just one, this one horrible person I hate always shows up, and I don't know how to deal with them, and so that that's basically your Claire. And so saying like Vince, like saying like, no, we didn't make a Week in Review to talk to Vince and Claire. We made Week in Review to talk to Penrose and Amrov or various things, but because we have bad karma, we keep on talking to Claire and Vince, and it's a karmatic because really all the voices that we talk to are basically an extension or representation of the voice of God. So if you're talking to Claire, that means that right now what God has to say to you is coming through in the voice of Claire. I mean, you could look at it as suffering in general, that sometimes God's message to us is suffering. And you have to look at that in who God is choosing for you to interact with. That like, of course, I would like to be interacting with wealthy, famous, awesome people, but yet I keep on interacting with Claire. I must have really bad karma. And
I haven't talked to Claire in quite a while, but okay.
Yeah, so I mean, you have to accept your karma in the battle. Like, what does it mean? Like, oh, I exposed Claire. Like,
yeah, it means I exposed Claire, and that I moved
on. Sort of
accomplishment.
Deal. Like, you're gonna collect your prize for that.
There were several reasons.
Let's just say, like, God forbid, you're saying like, I killed and tortured that person. If God forbid, and everything, violence. But saying good job, you really beat that person down. And you're saying like, oh, I exposed Claire. Like what you want, like a cookie for that? Like, no,
I don't want any.
I'm not giving you a reward for exposing Claire.
I don't want a reward.
You think that you accomplished something, you did anything good because you exposed Claire. It's probably negative.
Probably. I mean, that's why I stopped talking to her. There was no value proposition, and I'm cool with that. It's it is to some extent a value proposition. So it's like that value proposition has been exhausted. I mean, I guess some people find it funny to watch us argue, but to me, it's it would be bad karma to promote that. So agree with you on that for sure.
Claire at 990 subs. I mean, she's really beyond you, even like in terms of material result. But Claire is almost at 1,000 subs.
All right, so I wanted to show what I was working on. It's just so awesome. Like, I cannot hold back any longer to show you guys this Blender thing. So I basically made the periodic table on this thing. So this is like a 3D modeling software. And the first thing I did was print it off. I just really wanted to make my periodic table, like the full model of it. I don't know if you can watch on the video, Doovid. I guess it's going to be a little bit behind, but I'm just gonna.
Yeah, I see.
Seems like a good time to start going through the.
Yeah, go on. I'm just gonna get myself a drink.
Awesome. Yeah, so people in the audience are waiting for me to lash out a Doovid. It's not really my style to do stuff like that. But you know, I agree that it is nice when people can be predictable. And it's comforting. Predictability is a comforting thing. And that's why I've got this periodic table, because it's the, very beautiful pattern and very predictable, yet still mysterious. So the idea to remember here is that this is I don't know what I'm going to call this yet, but it's one of the variants of the model. So this is getting to the end here. We'd be at the 7th row here. So each of the layers is a row of the periodic table. Each of the spheres is it's a pair of elements. Okay, so people who are already familiar with chemistry have the spin plus and minus a half, right? So you have this sort of alternating, slightly more, slightly less reactive based on how many electrons are filled in that last orbital, which is sort of, you look at it in the model as basically like emulating like a hypervalent shell, like an even more valency shell than the other valent shells. The last two electrons is that either is going to have 1/2 plus 1/2 spin or minus 1/2 spin. So what I've done is unify that into a single entity of like the adjacent species having 1/2 and plus a half. So this model has 59 spheres, whereas the standard periodic table has 118. But so if you wanted to see this as what it actually is in the 2-dimensional model, you just take each sphere and like divide it in 2. So your central sphere here, the big one, that's the hydrogen and helium. And the reason it's rendered this way is just to sort of actually bring into focus the measurement limit, which is the 3 + 1. So we've got the 1 in the middle, and then the 3-bit is on the alternating sides, but we see this, what I'm calling fundamental dualism, like a splitting of the dimensions, but there's still a symmetry that's maintained. The point is that the qualities of the elements are actually dependent on each other. And ultimately, what causes the qualities of elements to rise in the first place is the measurement limit. So the idea is that there's only so much information in the universe. The only linearly independent information in the universe is the measurement limit. And all other data is ultimately deriving from this measurement limit. 3 + 1. So 3 space-like plus 1 time-like. What does that mean on the micro scale? Quantum periodic table, 3 + 1 canonical orders or periods or rows in your standard 2D model. Now, you don't throw away the 2D model when you discover the 3D model, because the 2D model still, quote unquote, works. I mean, obviously, we've got the Gibbs free energy, we've got electronegativity, and on that we've already managed to deduce from the 2D version and papers in 2D. So obviously, it's always going to have its place. I was seeing in the chat, not too many comments about the actual subject matter, but hopefully this is a little bit interesting for people. I see Doovid's back. Can you see are you seeing the images, Doovid?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. Like I totally got into this thing. So like I spent so many hours on it. It was crazy. But anyway, back to my story. So I wanted to show why this model is better, more complete than your standard model, which isn't wrong 100%. It's just not complete. So what are we looking at here is your basic hydrogen helium ball. And the thing is that the size of the atom between atoms doesn't really, it does change, but it's not like it's changing on orders of magnitude. Where the changes are most pronounced are between rows. Okay, so between row 1 and row 2, you get this jump in size. But then within row 2, yeah, they're not all the same size, but they're closer to each other, right? So you can kind of see this as a layering of electrons. Each new layer of electrons gives you a higher range of sizes approximately, because there's other factors, right, that are going to dictate this. It's not just one thing, because you got electric and you got uncertainty. So let's have a look at how this model is going to give us the information that we're interested in. Just trying to remember how exact. I'm going to have to go through a couple different slides here. All right. Here's the. Okay, so I'm pretty sure everyone knows that water molecules are bent. So what we want to do here is get an idea of what's the water molecule going to look like. So we want to reason it from basically from the ground up. So we would be starting with the oxygen. And so we model this as a central sphere, and then the hydrogen is going to be modeled smaller because they're on a different period. But if I also had a nitrogen, I would be approximately the same size for my geometric approximation. And we'll see what the point of these geometric approximations is in just a second. So let's have a look here with the first. Okay, I've got some text here, and I don't know where I put it. Aha. Okay, so there's oxygen. And now we're also going to introduce some hydrogen. So water is H2O. So now we're taking what you call a naive VSEPR approach, which would be the standard model, which is valence shell electron pair repulsion. And what's that? What that's saying is that on the valence, anything, the electronegativity is maximally repelling itself. So electrons are on the outside, protons are on the inside, and the electrons all have the same charge. So that the idea is that they're going to push each other away from each other. So they're going to be maximally separated. So if that's true, then the hydrogen should be on either side. So actually, VSEPR predicts that water should be nonpolar, aka a linear molecule, aka a straight line. So what I've done here is done this, incorrect diagram, but now we're going to see why it's incorrect. So I've inscribed the molecule inside a circle. So I don't know if you could see that circle. I'm going to check. I think I can see it. I cannot tell if you're having trouble seeing, like there's a little black circle. Maybe I need to make it thicker, but I put a black circle around it and it looks like it's okay. And isn't this a great program though? I had so much fun with this thing. So there's your starter point. And the theory is basically saying that everything is emulating maximum entropy state. And what's maximum entropy state? Well, it's the set of 7 noble gases. So everything is emulating a noble gas. And so we have to deduce here why this linear molecule is not actually emulating a noble gas as best as it possibly could. So we could do other comparisons. We could say, well, what if they were super close together? Well, obviously this presents a problem. So why would them being adjacent present a problem? Well, they have the same charge. So that if the closer they get, I don't know if you've ever tried to put two same charges together, but the closer they get together, the more they push apart. So nature minimizes the work done. So if these things are ultra close together, well, we have to ask ourselves, what the heck's pushing them into such close proximity? So we notice that, let me just see here. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, I'm still learning the layers on this thing, so it's a little bit a little bit awkward. Still working on making a video here, but now what I'll do is superimpose if the greens are brought down a little bit such that the circle is much smaller. So we have these two circles can be compared, and I think one's like about 2.3, one's about 3. So you're getting a significant size reduction. You're saving a lot more space from going to the linear, from linear to bent. And we get this circle here that is getting smaller. So the idea is that this circle, you start with your big circle for the linear molecule, and then you make that circle start to get smaller. And then when the derivative of that circle getting smaller is 0, right? You stop getting smaller circle for how much you're compressing the green things, because there's a limit to how much that green compression actually yields a smaller circle. Once you get to that point, you just stop rotating them, and then you say, okay, well, this is where my approximation is going to be. And the cool thing is that based on that idea, which remember, it's why is it shaped the way that it is? Because it's emulating the maximum entropy state, which is a much smaller configuration than the linear molecule. And so I'll show the last bit, which was, okay. So this program allows you to make measurements. So I went through and figured out it allows you to know like where the points are. So from there I could deduce the measurements.
Yeah,
And I'll show you what the approximation is. Whoops, sorry, I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to do too many things at once here. Okay, so here we go. That's what it gives you for the angle. So this is the approximation using nothing but spheres. So all I'm doing is going on some very simple geometric assumptions that the first row is going to be an order of magnitude smaller than the next one, and they're going to increase based on the row size, not based on the column as much. The very simple approximation, you get 103.46 degrees, and the real bond angle is only it's only about a degree off, so it's pretty interesting. It's a good start, and it's actually going to tell you why water is bent, because the molecule wants to fit into a smaller circle, and it's able to do that by bending a little bit, but it can't bend much more because the repulsion forces between the hydrogens are going to start to kick in. So this is basically your balance point between those two effects. So hopefully that was interesting. What did you think of Blender, Doovid? Have you ever used a 3D program?
Yeah, when I trained on 3D printers, there was different softwares, and basically every 3D printer had its own software. You could make a model in CAD or different files, and render it into the 3D printing readable program. And at that time, the key thing was like support structures. So if you just made like a simple diagram like this in a CAD or comparable program, and that was readable by the printer program, then the printer has to render it in a way that it's going to be able to print it, and has to come up with a strategy. And a lot of times that strategy needs to include support structures, just because the nature of making a 3D printing is the weight of it. Sometimes you can't just print the object, you have to print support structures with it. And I'm not sure the current status of the main different software, or if still each printer has its own software package that you have to go about. And so it's an interesting question of physics for the 3D printer of what's the best method to actually print this 3D object. And there's different types of 3D printers, and we could get more into that. Like I'm not up to date. I've heard of Blender before. There's a few other ones. SolidWorks isn't for 3D printing. SolidWorks is I think the Dassault Systems 3D graphics program, also like similar to CAD, but that also could be rendered and um, but yeah, very very nice. Like I've been hearing about the periodic table and coming to science classes soon, and printing it. Probably visual models might be better. 3D printed models. My father started ordering recently the last few years. Now he has like already a ton of it as medical models of anatomy. He's got like a skeleton, heart, cells, and various things. But they're useful to have models and then graphical conception. So yeah, Blender's a pretty good program. Unfortunately, I never became sufficient to find employment in any of these programs that like 3D scanners, 3D printers. But good for Jennifer that you were able to get your model in into the software that the 3D printer uses to print.
I tried everything I could to not have to do that. I was hoping someone else would do it for me, but my friend got the thing, and he's just like, try a Blender, and he was really nice. He like made me an example one. It wasn't perfect though, like the one that I just displayed it for a second there, but I'll display it again. That's the one I made myself, and the angle is really good from the middle outwards. Like I wanted that to look pretty straight and clean, and that's a composite, not very expensive, comparatively speaking. Like there are some more expensive prints, but I'm surprised that this rig can handle all those materials. I guess it's not an issue for it. It's kind of awesome. But this is a composite of plastic and wood, I think, so it gives it a bit of a wood feel and sound. So very interesting, and yeah, can't wait to get my hands on those. Coming soon to e-merchant. Maybe Doovid will sell them for us on eBay. Maybe he'll do us a solid. What do you say, Doovid?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be economical, or who would watch it, and shipping, and like, because no, I mean, it's probably not economical. It probably costs like $50 to have those things printed up. I mean, if you had your own 3D printer,
we do have our own. That came out of my own. Well, it's not mine. It's my friend's, but the greater me. Jen,
well, it's saying if your friend was willing to, let you monopolize the 3D printer.
He's willing to let me pay for it. I don't know if he's willing to let me monopolize it. He wants to get. He's like dreaming up getting a whole bunch more. I'm like, slow down here, bucko. Get one going at first, but he's done a whole bunch of stuff. Like he printed off some clay models, things. They were really cool in a pencil holder. So he's just.
You could bring him on Week in Review if he wants. We could talk about the business dynamics of it, but
he wants to. He just said, "Oh, I need 100 hours to become an expert." I'm like, seriously? Like, I don't know. He's just, the way we're beset by perfectionists, Well, he'll come when he has time.
I'm going to tell you need 10,000 hours to become a master.
I think he just wants to be conversant. Like, he doesn't want to get asked a question and get stumped. So he wants to be,
Well, I mean, like, quiz him, but I mean, just to try to move forward and my understanding of 3D printing with his and get, or what he's trying to accomplish in the price ranges, and saying if you wanted a business where you're doing prototypes and you charge more money, even a few $100s for a prototype, or so like if this was a business and Jennifer came and like, can you make me a prototype item, and he and he had to do most of the drawing, rendering, and printing, and he charged a few $100s for it. So at the end of the day, he's still making high tens of dollars an hour. And then if someone was like, well, I want 100 of them, and some sort of calculation, okay, it'll be $20 each, and he calculates a time and material factor where it's going to cost like $4 in material, electricity, whatever, each one, and take a certain amount of time, that's his profit margin. So
I was just going to sell you some, and then you can keep the difference. But do whatever you want. If you want to make a big thing out
Well, I
of
mean,
it.
you're making a calculation as a business model to say like, no, I mean, making like 3D printing periodic quantum periodic tables is probably a bad investment because the price for them will probably be too high. Like if you're going to make thousands of them, maybe, and even like your friend with the 3D printer he has, like if he had a $200,000 3D printer where he could print, like 10 of those models at the same time in an hour, versus having like one of those where that he has where maybe it takes him 10 hours to just print one of them type things and make a big difference. And then his investment, saying like he was able to make that one maybe with a 3D printer that cost $1,000, versus a $200,000 3D printer. And if you're saying he just wants a 3D printer for the fun of it versus a 3D printer for business, and then does he actually have clients that are going to hire him to put his 3D printer to use, like the people that he knows that have prototypes of things that they want to make and are going to pay him. But I have booklets and booklets.
He already has a full-time job, so we'll see how it goes. I'm encouraging him, but we'll see.
I have on my YouTube page, like the conventions, and a lot of them there's multiple 3D printing companies, and a lot of them have tens of printers, and they're for-profit businesses where it probably would have cost Jennifer hundreds of dollars to get that made, from like a professional 3D printing company. If she had her own rendering where all they was like, can you print this file? It might have only cost like $20-$30. And, she already was just, went to one of those companies and just sent them an email. Can you print this? And they asked for a price that didn't require like any of the rendering or that. But yeah, that is a pretty good business. And I myself, like considered that multiple times, still even consider that it's, it's a scientific, it's an interesting business. 3D printing is related to engineering and prototyping, that you could, have people coming to you with unique ideas, and you could make models for, things that you've never seen before. The CAD physics 3D printer is essentially the same problem is in creating an XYZ coordinate system. And, so if you have the CAD model and it's simple, you're going to put 0, 0, 0 at the Z coordinate, and even for printing. So if it's easier for Jennifer to make her model with 0, 0, 0 in the center of the first sphere, that's probably not how it's going to be printed. So to make to print it, you might want to make 0, 0, 0, a bottom corner or some
he
bottom.
he can calibrate all that. Like he's pretty talented, so he can just take anything I give him in a Blender file and make it printed.
Yeah, so I'm just saying on the physics level, the rendering means changing. One of the things means changing the coordinate system or adjusting the coordinate system.
I don't think he even has to do that, because what Blender outputs is a series of coordinates, which are then calibrated to, I don't know what the step of, like we can ask him that, like what the step of calibrating the printer is, but it looks like it's more of a physical material issue. You have to sort of check, the stuff actually, they call it filament. I was calling it ink for a while, but it's the 3D version of ink. So he seems to have figured it out. Like I just, there was nothing.
Yeah, it usually comes like in a spool of thread, although it's thick and it's plastic.
Yeah.
And I mean, so you look like his 3D printer is like a relatively cheaper one. So just have a roll of plastic and it have some sort of device that moves in 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z. And there's a heating component where the electric component melts the plastic over the XYZ through the extruder, and the extruder has a coordinate system. It's going to be XYZ, and the melting will move to the XYZ along that's planned to be printed. So I mean, yeah, of course it's a computer, it's a mechanized thing. and it's going to have some XYZ coordinate system, and when it melts, it's going to be moving the extruder to a certain point and at a certain pace that's calculated and calibrated by the computer, and how much your friend does versus how much the program does. Your friend may do very little. The program, he might have a program that basically does all that for him.
That's what it sounds like, because he didn't make a big stink out of the file that I sent him. He didn't, and he's the type to do that. So
Yours might not have needed so much support structure because it was largely solid. That the ones that you have to print out support and then like peel them off or sandpaper them off afterwards. Did you have to sand down your model?
He didn't tell me, and I don't know if it's like
he may have sanded it for you.
Well, he said he has some helpers now, so I think there's also a plan to paint it, but we'll see how that pans out because it's pretty fine. I've got a video here displayed if anyone's interested. So there are some imperfections on the edge, but
I mean, from an industrial point of view, he's got a cheap 3D printer, and even the metal filament printers work in an interesting way. I have some pictures I can show on my Facebook a different time. Was that so? He made a few of them, or that's that small? That's the only one he made that small.
I think that's the only one so far.
Okay, it looked like it was much bigger, but I see that's pretty small.
I just think, like, in all history, all the people who were artisans or sculptors, imagine, could they even get their head around how amazing this technology is? Like, it's like the most sublime human computer interface. When you're doing stuff with your hands, like actual clay, like it's never quite perfect. There's always wrinkles in clay. And I couldn't even imagine marble. Like, I have never been able to work with marble, but this is just like, whoop, you get the sphere, and the sphere is already made and it's already perfect. It's just there, and the only limit is your own creativity. Like, just think about. I always feel like we should, celebrate or something. Are you screen sharing? Do you want me to make it a bit bigger?
Yeah, if it works, put it on screen share, and let me see if I show some. I mean, like, I appreciate your friend helping, but you're saying he's just got like a cheapo home.
Yeah,
3D.
it's baby steps, though. I mean, I appreciate that he's taking the time to do this for me, and we'll see how it goes, and hopefully people get inspired, and I'm sure that things will work themselves out.
Yeah, even that, like a few $1,000, even if he only paid a few $100s for a bottom of the line 3D printer, it's still more than I have, and something.
All right.
I got the Faro 3D laser scanner technology demonstration. Okay, so here is in Metro Detroit, a firm that specializes in 3D printing, selling 3D printers and metal filament, and doing things like dentistry, probably fillings. Caps are one of the larger purposes of 3D printing. Here you see the first. You see the. Okay, so here is their office, and in their display, these are metal filament 3D printed things, but just on display, a whole bunch of devices, from like car components to medical components, a pair of shoes. So go through. So here they did a little lecture. Here, metal components, like golf ball widgets. But eventually I'm going to get, here's the chessboard. I guess EOS, I think, is an international company. You could look them up. E-Manufacturing Solutions. They're here in Metro Detroit. So here are metal filament 3D printers, and these cost $500,000 to millions of dollars. And this was already a few years ago. You'd see the control panel on it, and they have basically like a laser. There's a few different ways that the metal filament printers work. It's a little different because the plastic ones, and I'll show after this the plastic one, the Israeli company actually. But the plastic ones will actually extrude a plastic, is where the metal filament ones like shoot a laser, and some of the more complicated ones will actually shoot like single atoms of the metal to make the component. But these ones, they have like a base of metal filament, and they fire a laser on it, and it causes the pieces to join. And it could do it so that multiple pieces are made. So they're making like certain components here, and the laser is firing. And this 3D printer, some of the plastic ones also, the shelf that it's going on actually lowers. So it does a complete layer, and then it goes down, like a fraction. They're very controlled, like a thousandth of a millimeter or something. And then eventually you take it out. And the metal filament ones, you have to sand and take a lot of finishing work. So here they're actually giving a demonstration. You see some of the metal filament, little widget that they just made while we were there, and pretty cool. So as I say, these are the EOS is a company that does multiple things. They sell 3D printers. They do 3D printing services where you could go bring them a prototype, or they even do manufacturing level production where you could tell them I want 1,000 pieces or something like that, and it have its price range, and they're right here in Metro Detroit, in the car manufacturing. So that was interesting. What do you think of that? That's already like even 5 years ago, so the technology's probably got much better. I'll show you
It's
the
really
other
cool.
one
Yeah,
that has the plastic printers, just to show.
It's too bad about all that extra work being required. It would be cool if that could be done with lasers. That's what makes me think about, like, what's the next step of this? Well, let's get the final stage of it done by lasers, robot lasers. That's seems.
Or sanding, robot sanding. I mean, the
Yeah,
3D
they're
printer
sanding
already.
lasers.
Yeah, I don't think that's in the works even.
Damn.
I could explain, the process for how it works, why that's not. This was a Michigan-Israel business bridge. You heard is 3D printing. This is a local company, and this was open house specifically for the Michigan-Israel business bridge, and the owner of this company was from Israel, and he actually came to speak to us. So, see, these are all plastics at this point. There was all, they give us the MIBB, Michigan Israel Business Bridge. That's a USB port. So I guess they had the thing, the little USB drive, and they were printing the plastics. But you could see that it's a large printer, and they're printing like 20 of these at one time. That a larger printer that will go in one swath around, and in that one swath is enough to have a certain section. And so in this case, every time the extruder arm moves across, it's capable of doing a layer for multiple objects at the same time. And so this they were able to do while we were there. So this is at this point, the Fortis 250 MC, this is already in 2013, almost 10 years ago, would have been like $300,000. There are probably better versions right now. And there's different 3D printers for different purposes. So if you want a larger base one that could print multiple ones at the same time, versus if you want one that could print larger, more precision objects, if you want ones that could print with different colors that have different inks or different materials. So, this is a local company. This man actually sold his company, and I see him around at events occasionally. I mean, the local, so the Israeli guy, but the local distributor. Let's see if we get this Israeli guy here. He was Orthodox. He had a yarmulke on. So this is the man who Bassi is the name of the company. This is the local distributor. He sold his company. Thank God. I think he made millions of dollars. Good for him. I see him around at these conventions pretty often, kind of friendly. Stratasys, I'm sorry. Stratasys was the Israeli company. And this man here is the Israeli engineer who designed it. Now he's here drinking. He gives you can't even see he had a tiny yarmulke on. I mean, he was like very modern Orthodox, but he was wearing a yarmulke, a tiny one. And he went over. So this was already 10 years ago. This was the first major presentation I heard on 3D printing, and it was through basically an Israeli company. They were trying to promote Israeli technology. That was back in 2013. But since then, I see 3D printers everywhere. And now when I go to regular shows, there's a lot of 3D printers on display, and there's multiple companies that prototype and make parts and will set up, as including more and more companies that make 3D printers and sell them. I think MakerBot's also Jewish. Have you heard of MakerBot?
No, this is really my first foray into all this. Into this
MakerBot
stuff.
was the first like commercial home 3D printer device. Cost about $2,000. Came in like a box, like a one by one box. You're just one color, one extruder, and I forget the software. Now there's a whole bunch of them, and you can even, it looked like yours was an open model. It wasn't boxed in, and you can even larger ones. And at some of the conventions I go to, they'll even have high school science classes that build their own 3D printers, because it's really a simple robot. Like all you need is a robot arm that could take XYZ coordinates attached to a heating element, that they call an extruder, that you feed in this plastic filament in that melts it, and so that it's coordinated, the melting with the location on the XYZ coordinate system. So it is something that a high school science club could actually prototype and make their own 3D printer. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that. I've done on my YouTube channel multiple times.
Seems pretty advanced.
Like, I mean, it's a high school team that are demonstrating their own 3D printers. I mean, it's not that advanced, because all you need is a robot arm that reacts to XYZ coordinates combined with some sort of device that melts a fed plastic spool into it.
Sure. I still just think it's exciting on the creative side of it. That's all. The technology
To have
I
a highly
is
accurate
not.
About a $200,000 machine that has like a device that has to meet endurance specifications. So like 3D printing here in Metro Detroit, like they make cars here, and if you could 3D print widgets for devices, they have to be able to meet the standards of what it takes for the durability and long-term longevity of the device. So like your little thing there doesn't need to be put into a machine and have like endurance capabilities. If you eventually sold them on the open market and And really, you'd have to paint these yourself. Like they do have colored ones where you could do the color, and they have different ones. I think they even have ones that could do hundreds of different colors that have like 8 or 10 different colors and mix the colors to make all sorts of colors. You could even get like a maker bot that has 2 different spools or 2 different colors. But usually something like that you would have to paint yourself afterwards. So you 3D print it, and then you would have to paint it afterwards. But you're not talking about an engineering device that's going to go in an engine and has to last weathering and the various elements for years.
Yeah, it's just a preliminary design. I mean, that's not even the actual. That's not even the real shape of it. Like if we were theoretically going to make a quantum computer out of this design, it would need to be made out of something that could sustain the non-local photon field, because that's going to be your information centralizer and ultimately computer. All right, so I just got to get rid of that. Yeah. So this shape here, this isn't the final step. So the final step, you get that by taking this shape and inscribing it inside another sphere. Okay, because remember, it's always the sphere is the maximum, because there's like maximum entropy states of the 7 noble gases, but there's also the primordial maximum entropy state, because those 2 things operate simultaneously. Primordial maximum entropy state is just a sphere. So this whole shape is not a sphere, so it's got to then be inscribed to a sphere, the same way that the water molecule wasn't actually linear, even though it seemed like it ought to be at first. It became inscribed to a smaller sphere. Same thing with this thing. It's going to inscribe into a sphere that minimizes its non-sphereness, but also is going to find a balance against the repulsion between the valence electrons. So it's this thing plus fitting it into a bigger sphere so that everything is spread out, so that the amount of work that the same likely charged entities, i.e. electrons, have to do on each other is minimized. So yeah, I see Nicholas Petrus and Ariel Suarez in the chat, so thanks very much for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate it. We've had a great show so far, so I'm guessing the JF show just ended, and so you guys thought you would come on over. Oh, it's good that you should ask that, Bob Elvis, because there was like a recent, I think I sent you the link, Doovid.
About the cobalt?
Yes. Yeah, that's what they were using, right? The Singularity Hub one. Yeah, so there was a bit of a trolling on my part where I was sort of teasing these publications who were saying that like the universe is a neural net, because the neural net is based on an approximation of how they think the brain works. So it's basically saying that the universe works like our approximation of a brain, but they're saying, oh, it's actually a neural net. Well, neural net doesn't really have an identity unto itself in that sense. So it looks like we're gradually getting closer to quantum mind, but it seems like it's going to be a claw by claw, inch by inch process. So basically, I don't know what it means when the quantum mind hypothesis is accepted or not. I mean, they're doing research. They're calling it quantum brain. It's based on the principle that you can have entangled, measurable systems, which are going to map to some other thing that you're trying to model. That's the premise of quantum computing. Can this work? Well, maybe, but I still think that you're going to get the most bang for your buck if you go to a purely photonic approach. Now, I know that's intimidating because it's 3-dimensional. Lasers, but we got the 3D printers. We can, print out ultra. That's sort of the selling point. Like, you don't have to be afraid of the 3-dimensional precision of the quantum computer because we have the printer. But I don't even know what this is basically saying. It's just looking like, because you talk about AI, it's like such a generic thing. Like, what is the common thread between all the AIs?
You want to ramble a little bit and I'll take some medicine, or do you want to just wrap up? We did 2 hours. No, I don't know anyone coming on. I largely covered the majority of my thoughts, and we keep on talking, but I might need a break then. So
No, that's cool. If nobody else wants to come on, we could wrap it up and have a relatively shorter stream this week. I thought it was great, and I really appreciate you reading the Diana book. Hopefully, you can continue that and get through it all in a later stream.
Yeah, I mean, I think people got the main point of the idea. I mean, I could read, if you want, I'll read more of it now, but I'm not sure it's like such a weekend review thing to do. But it's pretty interesting to what is the history of the Aryan and in this concept of reconstruction of the Aryan self, which is kind of like a Dayananda's form, called like a Hindu revival movement, like the Baal Shem Tov. Hasidus was a Jewish revival movement that Brahma Samaj, Arya Samaj are these Hindu revival movements based on an understanding, interpretation of how things are believed to have been in the past, and like a Make America Great Again type thing, where it's a returning India to the glory of the past. And then in the European model, where it's not really returning Europe to the glory of the past, but it's an alternative history of the people as opposed to the dominant biblical narrative of saying that our origins are from the Aryans, and even though they didn't originally come from Europe, that they came from Iran or whatever, but that somehow that narrative would also be meaningful for Europeans, at least briefly. Now I don't know how meaningful it is to Europeans, and even the alternative model of Aryans like being an origin of civilizations at this point is probably not that meaningful for Europeans. So it's been probably returned properly to now Hindu nationalism that so even this literature is putting Dayananda Saraswati as one of the fatherheads of Hindu nationalism, that now where you have Hindus running India, that you say Dayananda Swami is one of the biggest precursors of that led to this possibility that exists now.
Cool, yeah. So thanks so much for your contributions, and yeah, it's too bad we couldn't get more people on, because I'd be definitely down to keep on going, but I get it, people are busy and tired and whatnot.
You
So
don't need to
scary
talk
to
just
come
to
on
talk.
Week in Review.
And yeah, I mean, I'd hope that Root and Branch was going to come back this week, so we'll see. Charles, I'm not sure. Like I might trigger a little too much distance in him. Like, so we'll see. Hopefully, we'll keep it going. But right now, it's not really leading to like useful connections. So it's like an audience, they're interesting conversations, but I haven't had, like people reach out to me like, like I saw you on the Charles Moskowitz show, and now they're watching Week in Review.
Yeah, like
he
he's
didn't.
almost losing his composure,
He didn't even take up us on the help. Like even at the beginning of the show, I was like, he went live when I was, still trying to tell him like, we like I got Jennifer to, said she was going to help him for free, get fix some of his technology, and he was like, yes, do it. But then he never called or scheduled. So we'll have to see how that works. And generally, I'm a pretty easy, agreeable person. I could work together with people on whatever level they reciprocate. So you can see bigger plans, like should there be larger reciprocation. But even with low level reciprocation, you can still have you're working, so Brundle's still in the chat, like Luke Ford, Babs, like as long as there's some form of reciprocation, you could keep a ongoing relationship, avoid conflict, and avoid escalation of conflict.
It looks like Ariel might come on to save the stream for the 10 minutes that you're going to go hit up some medicine if you want to keep the show going. No pressure, Ariel. Be cool to talk to you.
I'll hit mute.
Your name might actually come from the word Arya, which is kind of hilarious.
Well, Ariel's usually a Hebrew name. It means like the Lion of God.
It's the unification. There's your grand unification, is that name.
Well, Ariel's straight Lion of God in Hebrew. Ari means lion, and El means God. So if not sure if that's the origin, but usually Ariel's a straight biblical Hebrew name that means lion of God. But
Yeah.
I'll mute, and if you want to ramble or someone comes on, that's fine. Or if you just want to end the show when I come back in like 10 minutes, if it's done,
It
it's
looks
done.
like the show's gonna be saved.
Okay,
Hello?
so you there, Ariel?
Hey, can
Hello?
you hear us?
Okay, I'll let you try to work through this, so I'll see what's going on then.
Can you hear us?
Hi, yeah, I can hear you guys. What's up?
Awesome. Yeah, it looks like Doovid left the meeting, but I
How's
think
it
he did
going?
that
I
by accident.
just
Oh, there we
I
go.
just jumped in to say hi. Hello.
Hey, maybe we can tell the audience about our conversation about consciousness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so let me think here. We didn't do a stream, eh? I did a stream with someone else that I also met in JF's chat. So it was cool. It didn't last very long though. It's only about 20 minutes. So you and I talked for a bit, and yeah, we also got to talking in JF's chat again the other day, didn't we, about reincarnation?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think like it's just a cosmology. Like I don't really think you can quote. I mean, I think I can prove it, but I don't think I can like convince somebody that it's
Mm-hmm.
real, because it's kind of a belief, you know.
Okay.
And people have to believe things. I mean, they should believe things of their own accord, right?
Yeah, I guess probably if I get to experience it myself, I'll be convinced.
Well, the way I look at it is like, you know, where does your personality come from? Like, why don't you have the same personality as your siblings, if you have any?
Oh,
Hi, Michael, and thank you so much for saying my stream was interesting. I appreciate it. Sorry, it was someone in the chat. Yeah, so like to me, it's like it's about science, right? It's like if you want to know the answers to questions, you need a theory to predict the result that you observe. Like your theory has to be consistent with results, but your theory shouldn't attempt to prescribe reality. It should attempt to describe reality optimally, and then you can predict the future configuration of reality with a greater accuracy, and also understand context of what's happening much better. I mean, who wants the responsibility of predicting the future, right? But it is
okay.
nice. It is nice to know, you know, why are things the way they are? You know, so if you look at your siblings, like take evolution, Darwinian evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's that saying? That's saying, well, it's fucking random, and there was some fucking shit that happened, and it was all wonky, and then boom, there's all of a sudden this aggregation of micro changes that led to something else. But I mean, is that really what's happening? Is that
I
really a
mean,
predictive model? Because like that model kind of says that model's explanation for why siblings don't have the exact same personality, right, is genetic randomness. Like, what does that mean? That's, to me, that's not an answer. It's like, well, what's the meaning of the universe? Oh, chaos. Okay, well, have fun with that. That's not really an answer, and I don't.
are there?
Sorry. There's obviously some element because of entropy, right? Of chaos.
Yeah.
So entropy and chaos, right? Since we know that entropy, I'm sorry about the lagging, you guys. I don't know what it is. It seems to be fixed now. I apologize. I'm doing my best. Yeah. So there's obviously a tendency towards chaos in the universe. You know, you knock over a drink, it sucks. It's never good to knock over a drink, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question is like, well, what's the ultimate origin? Is it chaos or order? And the answer is, well, it's order, because the periodic table is arguably the most fundamental thing. The measurement limit is the source of all, there's the unique information in the universe, the source of all data. And it's, I mean, I can't think of something more ordered than that. I mean, it gives me a craving for marshmallow cereal and Lucky Charms. You know what I want? Like, I want a Lucky Charms that's like not all marshmallows, but like
Oh,
3 times as much marshmallows.
you're talking about cereal now?
If I had a cook, the first thing I would get the cook to do is to go into a box of Lucky Charms and remove 50% of the non-marshmallow constituents.
Oh,
Sorry, I got derailed. I just got really excited there. But
no,
back
that's
to my
fine.
original point. We want a scientific theory because we want to be able to understand what the heck's going on. And the scientific theory gives a starting point for, it's like you wind up, you ever seen one of those things where it's like a marble running through a bunch of little traps, so people set them up and it goes, all around, and
Oh yeah,
I don't know what it is, marble parkour, but you know what I mean, right?
I think so.
You're not
Probably
just saying you know
marble.
what you mean to be amicable. You actually know what I mean, right?
Okay.
Or do no?
Yeah. I don't know what you mean. I think.
Okay. So the idea is, where does the marble start, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know because we're at the very end of the marble trap or marble parkour, right? We have to start from the end to figure out where we began, and it's like a gajillion steps, right? So we can't really go back a gajillion steps because we wouldn't even know where to start, nor can we be guaranteed we would understand the language it would take to start that way. So we scrap that and say, well, I'm just going to do a science model, which I admit from the get-go is a simplistic, it's a reductionist stratification of events. That's what science is. So it's very important not to overstate what science is, right? It's not everything. It's just the most, it's a chunking method that when you interpret things that way, gives you the most information. It's not the totality of all information. It's a perspective that makes the gathering of information easier because it's got context. And that's why we have to be so careful with science, because it does give us the most information. So if we want to answer a question like, why do my siblings and I not have the same personality with science, and we want an answer that's more accurate than randomness, we have to embrace the origin of mind, which is consciousness, and then go back and say, well, it's because it's literally different entities, but similar enough entities that they took birth to the same parents, and the differences between them are indicative of their individualized differences, because there's no physical reason why anyone would be identical to somebody else. There's probably a very low probability that any two humans could be truly identical. And so there's a variance within what humans can be, but it's not that big of a variance. And then when you get siblings, you're basically looking at the people with the entity's lowest variance to your own soul.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why they all harmonize with the same parents, because you're essentially drawing your qualities from your parents. It's like you're the painting and they're the paint, So if you've got purple, you got to make sure mom and dad have blue and red. So it's like plucking fruits off a tree. That's why you can see parental attributes of personality in the kids without the kids being a literal carbon copy of their parents. Like, you're not half your mom and half your dad. You're someone who is connected to them, obviously, in a very deep way. But if you want to understand what exactly that way is, you have to take the reincarnation angle, because otherwise you have no answer to the origin of your personality. Does that make sense? So it's a scientific argument. There is a philosophical argument you can make for reincarnation, but there is also a scientific one, because without a scientific, you can't really make predictions about consciousness if you don't understand what consciousness is, can you?
Okay.
So before we keep going, Michael Rothschild wants to know if we ever talk about economics and finance. Well, my streaming partner Doovovid could probably answer you better, because he's sort of the more expert in that. It's not my domain. He says he'd like to come on if and when we discuss those subjects. Yeah, you'd be welcome to come on. There's a link in the chat already, so I'll put it again. But please don't be a troll. Like, seriously, if you're a troll, I'm just gonna boot you in 2 seconds, okay? I'm not even kidding. And that's the cool thing about this new setup, is that it's really easy to boot trolls. So, fair warning, We don't want to make a bad impression on my friend. Is it Ariel or Ariel? Sorry.
I don't mind either way, to be honest.
Well, now you're just being difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Ariel.
Michael, if you want to come on,
Ariel
Doovid
Doovid.
should be back in about like, I don't know, 5 minutes, and he does like to talk about that stuff. Like he always brings it back to that. So
Economics.
finance and economics, but yeah, like
Mhm.
my main interest is consciousness and physics and
Okay.
religion. So economics is something I've talked about maybe a handful of times.
Well, you could talk about economic
A framing
philosophy
thing.
if you're into that.
Philosophy?
Economic philosophy, it is a thing. I know it is.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it
But
too much. I mean,
I don't know if you may be interested in it though.
well, I'm interested in what I can derive from pure logic. So if I don't agree with the axioms, then
Mhm.
it's hard for
Okay.
me to utilize the logic because I'm always going to be stuck on that step of like,
Yeah.
I'm not quite sold on the axiom.
No, that's right.
You know what I mean? So there's like, I'm aware of certain theories that are presented, and I think that science has to make predictions. So it's like,
Yes, it does.
it becomes science at the point where you can validate a prediction. And with anything social society, like social science is literally
Yeah.
harder. It's harder than material science because material science, like electrons don't lie to you. You might lie to yourself about the nature of electrons, but the electron can't be like, oh, you look good today, but actually you look like
Yeah.
shit. You know what I mean? Because humans can lie. Electrons can't lie. We may not
No.
know everything about them, but they don't have they're not complex enough to do something like lie. So social science has to incorporate, if it's going to work as a science, has to incorporate the fact that people are capable, A, of lying to themselves, and B, lying to other people.
Yeah.
And I'm not aware of I'm not aware of how to work with it as a science.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's one of the main reasons social sciences are not very reliable.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's not my domain of specialization.
No, they're not very reliable. But
Who
you
is
just told us
Dr.
why.
Kevin B? Do we talk about common law and property rights? Again, not really. It's more on the philosophical side of like, what is the purpose of a civilization? And arguing from a debating perspective of like building up arguments from first principles, literal first principles, right? Like you have to literally follow the trail of your suppositions one step to another, and you have to be willing to defend it, like a moat. You know what I'm saying? You have to be willing to buckle down, the same way the NPCs buckle down to defend the pathetic edifices of their egos from the shrapnel of reality, like that, except do it in defense of science, Don't double down in defense of a piddly little human ego. Science is extremely powerful as a method. But I think it's just like, it's actually really hard to just understand in the first place what does it mean on a philosophical level to be doing science? I don't think most people could answer that question. Hello?
Yeah, well, it is very difficult to answer that question.
So yeah, you said you're in school. What are you learning about? If you can tell us anything interesting.
It's computer science.
Yeah? What
Okay.
courses have you liked so far?
So it's programming. I took 2 semesters of it.
What language?
I'm taking Java, mostly Java.
You know what? I've always stayed away from Java. I'm literally
Oh,
afraid
really?
of Java. Yeah, I'm kind of like a huge ditz when it comes to programming computers because like I just suck at it, and I'm too proud to do something that I'm not like amazingly good at.
Yeah, I think you
First
taught me
try.
before. But do you
Sorry.
prefer? No, it's all right. Do you prefer another language then?
I never did. It was like a bet that I had with myself. It's like, I wonder if I can get around ever learning any computer language and just be that good at schmoozing the computer programmers. You know what I'm saying? Okay,
Python
so
is more
I
beginner
just want to
friendly
stop
if
for
you
a
want
quick
to.
second and ask. Okay, Bub Elvis is asking me if it would be an idea to get all the dissident physics people together. They could promote each other and peer review each other. I'm not sure who you're referring to, but I don't want to have yet another muscle flex with an insecure wannabe alpha male. I just want to talk to people like Ariel, okay? Because he's a guy who spends a lot of time thinking about shit, and that's what I like. Whereas these dissident physics people, like, I don't want to name names or anything, but I've never had a really great experience. Okay, that's not true. Sorry. But most of the times I talk to people who've been indoctrinated into physics, it's not gone super well. Okay.
Wow, it's really that bad?
It's always at some point that there's going to become a point where the communication basically breaks down completely.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, whether it's the Big Bang or whatever, I have to go through the logic of it. But if they're not following me into Logicsville because they're just focusing on saying what they want to say, not listening to what I'm saying, right? I listen when they're talking. I can do that. But it's a learned skill to truly listen to when someone else is talking. Another thing you got to learn how to do is interject and say, "Excuse me, I'm not following." Right? That's important. And then it's not it does it's I mean, you want to say you're worried you look stupid, but it's like you look more stupid to have lost the thread of the conversation 5 minutes ago. Because it's like, well, what am I talking for here? You know? So Doovid, welcome back. Somebody in the chat, I don't know if they're for real. I can't tell, but they said they would join in 10 minutes. So maybe they want to join, maybe not. But Ariel has been holding the fort down, so very appreciative of that. And I met him in the JF chat, and he's basically interested in just like a general philosophy stuff that we are. Do you know that you're sharing? Is there a reason why you're sharing, Doovid?
Yeah, I thought I'd show someone else. So we got Michael Rothschild.
Where is that? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, I thought I'd shown the background. I mentioned this a few times. When we're doing 3D printers, this tech shop which went out of business, and it was designed to be like a gym where you bought membership, and instead of having health equipment, they had industrial equipment. They had CNC machines and sewing machines and plastic mold injection. I bought these books here. I have these books on my shelf. Fabricated, The New World of 3D Printing, Getting Started with MakerBot, and the book on 3D printing. And if I have more books than that, but just that day, I bought those books, and I joined. And here's like a laser etching machine. Here's CNC machines. Your regular construction equipment, presses for like sweatshirt designs, large printer, architectural printers, sewing, industrial sewing, embroidery, the plastic mold injection, and so here they just had a form lab. Back then, the two main 3D printers. This was like almost 7 years ago. The main 3D printers were MakerBot and Formlab for like the home model one that you could buy for. Then it was like a few $1,000s. Like now you could probably get for high hundreds of dollars a desk 3D printer, and so not like a great 3D printer even at that point that they had there. So like the level of the equipment available, but it was a pretty cool idea. And I was a member of Engineering Society of Detroit. In fact, I let my membership lapse. And I went on their monthly tours, and this was on the tour. It was right near Ford Motor headquarters, and it was not a successful business venture. It went out of business. I remember they sent looking for investors, and it would have been like $25,000 to have bought, like early shares in the company, and I actually thought about it, but decided against it, and I guess I'm glad I did because it went out of business. And I took a few courses there on the 3D printer and etch, and I made something for my local synagogue. I believe it's still hanging. I had a special mantra laser etched. I thought it was pretty cool. Like it was like an awesome use of modern technology. So while I find that if you wanted to say something, I didn't catch your conversation, or Ariel, any of your, like who you are or what you were talking about. I just wanted to show some pictures, and I'll show some more. But if you want to fill me in on who you are, what you're talking about, go ahead.
Yeah, so not much to say now. I'm a computer science student. I'm interested in coding, programming in general. Um, Taking a course just to answer Jen's question earlier. My second semester on data structures and algorithms. It can be difficult, but with enough practice, I'm getting the hang of it. I'm interested in stuff like that for the most part. Also, philosophy is one of my main interests. Um, Science in general, I guess. Some sports, if you guys are into that stuff too.
I like volleyball and sailing, and I suppose golf
Animal?
is okay. I haven't played as much golf as I'd like, but golf is cool. But sailing, a yo ho ho and a bottle of rum, it's pirate's life for me. Because sailing,
Any-
really, you know what it's about ultimately? It's about philosophy. Okay, because if you're a noob, you don't like sailing, right? Because you
Mhm.
get seasick, you get all weirded out by the angle of the boat. But if you learn the proper sailing philosophy, which is to just chill out and look into the horizon, like you always want to be gazing at the horizon, because that calibrates you so you don't get sick. That moment,
These
when you just turn off the motor and hoist the old sailorinos, it's heckin' Kino. Go ahead, Doovid.
Yeah, so this I actually learned how to operate these machines. Um, the laser etchers. These are cheaper. You could get them maybe like $20,000, maybe even used ones for under $10,000. And I forget it was an Adobe something that you could just an art program. You could make the picture, and then there's a few settings like the strength and the depth, and then it etched it, and it took some time. And there were programs where you could do shapes like cups, and you would program in the curvature to do it. I made for my dad a cup, and so it's pretty cool technology. They had courses also for the 3D printer. I didn't take their 3D printer course, but yeah, pretty cool stuff. And if you go back to talking, I might show a little more engineering photos, just some cool equipment at um, technology conferences that I used to go to before COVID-19.
Cool, yeah. So good news, Ariel. The you know, universe is a quantum computer. So if you're studying computer science, you're on the right track to understanding the universe.
Oh, that's great.
Well, it's just the only problem is that you're learning transistor computers, and the universe is a quantum computer. But transistor computers are like a stepping stone to quantum computers. So it's one of the few skill sets that actually translates to my philosophical way of thinking. Like I suppose I could try to translate it into like financial logic or whatever, but that would be probably significantly harder. At least with computers, there's like a basis there that algorithm, compiler, those words essentially mean the same to any computer programmer.
It's the Michigan State University Particle Accelerator, Linear Particle Accelerator, Rare Isotope Production Labs. So obviously the quantum periodic table is a template because the reality is that each of atoms actually has many isotopes.
And that's all
That
included
might
in
all
the
be-
quantum table too.
They might all be classified as I think here's a full table. Here would be a full periodic table with all the isotopes, and I forget the colors of the predicted ones and the colored ones, the ones that have been produced or something with some color code. But the periodic table with all the possible isotopes looks. I mean, here they have it graphed out like this. But I don't even know how you'd conceptualize that if you expanded your periodic table to include the isotopes.
Yeah, that the information in there is not independent from the measurement limit. I'll explain on in a second. Dr. Kevin B, hi, who are you?
Hello?
Oh, John.
How's it
John,
going?
If you dislike me so much, John, why are you here? Jeez, John.
I don't dislike you.
Oh, you changed your mind. You came around. We're going to be friends now. That's good. I always enjoy a friend more than an enemy.
Always
I
have
sent
mercy on your
JF
enemies.
that story. Did you know that guy who in Montreal who got arrested for anti-Semitism? The CNP guy who got arrested for anti-Semitism?
Yeah. Her Majesty has no grounds to charge Travis Patron with
Travis Patron.
Hate speech under the Criminal Code Act. It's actually kind of funny. Like, there's kind of a backstory behind this, where he was at the CBC on Friday demanding an interview with which
Article in the link, if you could screen share if you want, Jennifer, but just this article, First Canada charges a political party
Are
leader
you
with
screen sharing
promoting...
right? I'm sorry, but are you screen sharing right now?
I thought I stopped screen sharing.
And you do want to screen share again or no?
If you want, you could put in the link, but I was saying there was an article.
It's hard for me to
about-
access the link from here.
Oh, it doesn't matter then. You will see the picture. Guy even looks a tiny bit like John. But Canada first time charges a political leader with promoting anti-Semitism. The leader of far-right political party in Canada, Travis Payton, the founder and head of the Canadian Nationalist Party. Is that the party that you were part of?
Yes.
So it's like your boy. That was like the top dude who got taken down for anti-Semitism, arrested.
That's not anti-Semitism. It's basically like, so this happened in 2019, this video of Beware of the Parasitic Tribe. And basically, that's the title of the video. And it just basically, it goes over, they profit from our wars. They try to demoralize us and everything we do. And then basically in the end of the video, it says, we need to remove these people once and for all from our country. He didn't allude to any specific ethnic group whatsoever. And he's been with close contact with the RCMP, and all they used that for was basically an excuse to put a hate speech investigation on him, so that he can basically tap his phone and try to piece together like a makeshift. And then they're like trying to claim like other like hate speech things he said in 2020 as well too. Like they're trying to misconstrue evidence in order to prop up a case that's not there. So the courts are basically, we're delegitimizing the courts as we speak right now. The courts lack jurisdiction to charge. Her Majesty lacks jurisdiction to charge Travis Patron with hate speech, or to police speech, I guess you could say.
Well, thank God Claire saved you from all this and helped convert you to Islam. That could have been you. If Claire had, delivered you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of bogus, the charges, but he's out now. But yeah, so life's good, not in the gulag yet, so life's good. So we'll see how it goes. It's getting kind of rough out here because there's a lot of pastors getting arrested too for practicing, church. Like their pastor Coates in Alberta actually is in maximum security right now for holding a church service, and he's been in over there for over a week. He turned himself in, but when you're dealing with these people, don't turn yourself in or don't plead anything. Make them prove their case against you. If you know you're in the right, hold fast and don't say anything. You have a right to remain silent. That's basically my advice. Sorry, I didn't want to talk about it. Doovid just brought it up. That's all. You guys could talk about whatever you're talking about.
Well, I hate to break it to you, John, but you bored Doovid away, so now he's gone.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just giving him just for people out there legal advice on how to deal with our current administration, especially if we live in Canada. These people say that they are practitioners of law, but another thing too, we also have a court case against the city of Saskatoon right now for defamation. Or not defamation, for I guess you'd say inhibiting our charter rights and freedoms. And also there's a clause in the Magna Carta as well too that we make specific mention of when they said that they wouldn't allow us to assemble and speak our policies in a publicly funded taxpayer facility during the 43rd election due to the group being denominational. So that'd be either like the group was political or religious in nature is the reason why we couldn't assemble. So it's basically direct. And there's a letter too that basically says we're not allowing you to assemble because your group is denominational. Like it's clear-cut evidence. And then the courts say, well...
Are you a protege of Dr. Kevin Barrett? Are you trying to follow in his footsteps now? Like he's actually a doctor and a professor of Middle Eastern studies, but are you following? He's also kind of got similar reddish features to you, but famous convert to Islam. Are you a protege of his?
Not necessarily, but it's just a kind of an avatar I used.
But you look up to him because they're saying you might look like him 30 years from now.
Maybe.
I mean, literally, one thing, you might literally look like him 30 years from now, but besides for that, you might, you could consider yourself a protege following in his footsteps.
I guess somewhat. I mean, I am studying Islamic culture right now, and I did get a bunch of hadiths from my brother, from my imam to read. So yeah.
And you look alike somewhat also.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the ginger-like features, yeah. Fiery, ginger-like qualities, I guess, yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to make it about me. Doovid just brought it up. I didn't want to I was just coming in here, just checking it out. But
so you're using the avatar to make a little sense of that.
Hey, John.
Hello, Ariel. How are you?
I hope you don't mind I interject. You mentioned you were affiliated with a political party?
Yeah, it's a federally registered party called Canadian National Party. We've been
Okay.
registered since 2019.
Well, I just want to know that. I don't know much about Canadian politics.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, he's just most recently arrested or unlawfully detained for supposed hate speech under the Canadian criminal code. He basically got dragged out and dragged into a jail cell. Yeah. And then they let him out after 48 hours. Because they didn't really have any grounds for him to charge him with, so they just let him out. One of the conditions they wanted to impose on him was basically no, you can't post anything online. Yeah, like he can't even post on his own website, according to the government of Saskatchewan. Yeah, it's quite and there's also, yeah, as I was saying too, there's like also like rest going on too. I know you guys are like want to have good positive vibes, but I mean, I'm just kind of just calling it as a spade, you know, like shit's getting real kind of, it's almost like
It's a spoil system, basically. I'm saying the elections have consequences, and including running the justice system. So Trump lost, Biden's in, even in Canada, the results there, but possibly after, these people that they've, just been using soft influence to go after.
Yeah,
it may not work. It may backfire, but I mean, it's pretty obvious why and how it's happening.
Yeah, I just like, these things. I like this seems like ever since like January 6th, it seems like it's amped up with the censorship and people getting arrested, and also the Proud Boys being labeled as a terrorist group in Canada. It seems like the elites at hand
they have their list, and saying they're just going to take the opportunity to try to worsen things for the people that are on their list. So in the scenarios like, okay, whatever the guy said, a few anti-Semitic things, like who cares? You really want to bring them down, ruin them for this, but then after the insurrection, there might be more initiative, like, yeah, go ahead and make that arrest.
Yeah.
And, because like, oh yeah, this guy, he might be a terrorist. Like, you need to bring him in. Where before, just like, okay, I mean, like he just said some silly statement about Jews. You want to have him arrested for that? To now it's like, oh, the insurrection. Like, you better arrest him now before he ends up trying to invade the Capitol and overthrow the government.
Yeah, but I mean, like we have been active a lot. We have been doing a lot of activism. So I think it just got to a point, a combination of like what happened on January 6th, and also too, we're doing a lot of activism, and we also have some other court cases going on as well too. And on Friday, he was actually at the CBC demanding an interview about being excluded from the 43rd federal election from the city of Saskatoon. And what happened? I have a video on my YouTube channel, but basically, the cops got called on him, and then there's 3 cops. So it was like 2 female, and it was like 1 male cop that was like out of shape, and and he's just basically saying like, you lack jurisdiction to tell me what I can and can't wear on public property. And he was acting on behalf of the CBC Corporation, because it's a publicly owned corporation, in that he has a story of public interest, that the Canadian public should know that the democratic integrity of Canada is at stake, as it turns to self-representation. And basically this guy, this black guy, just said, oh yeah, Travis Patron, he's a security risk. And then so he walked around CBC wanting an interview, and then the 3 cops came, and then the 3 cops said, we're basically trying to get him out, and they were trying to apprehend him, detain him, and he would let go. He ran out the CBC building, and then there's the next video. He has like an encounter with them, And he's just like, you guys got to be more diplomatic than this. You know, he was just sitting there peacefully explaining his case, and they wouldn't really let him.
Just peacefully saying,
mhm,
whatever
yeah,
he was saying.
yeah, yeah. And then and then she was just like, I was gonna detain you, I'm gonna put you down, and I'm gonna arrest you and give you a $2,800 ticket for not following the mask mandate, and then what was it? And then what else were you saying? Oh, that, and then it turned into like he wanted to go get a scarf, and they wouldn't let him go back in to get a scarf, and then they're just kind of just getting him away, and then he's still talking. So the one lady goes off, gets his scarf, and then there's like two other
Why was
cops
the
there
scarf
talking to him.
inside if he didn't go inside?
Pardon?
Where was the scarf?
The scarf was taken off him while he was getting chased inside the building. Yeah. So he wanted to get his scarf, and like this is when he was outside, basically. There's like a whole video of it. There's a lot going on, but yeah. So that happened on Friday. Then on the following Monday, he got arrested for hate speech. Yeah. So it's kind of like we just pissed off the beast, and they decided to take him in for 48 hours for no reason. They don't really have any reason. That's why they let him go. So. And there's a whole bunch of hit pieces. It's funny, ironic enough, the CBC, you go to the CBC, you have a story of public interest, and then, you get arrested for supposed hate speech, and then all of a sudden all these hit pieces come in from all angles, from CBC, CTV, all these like small news outlets. And
they start interviewing his like elementary school teachers, and like, I could tell he was bad when he was young. I remember when he said a racist comment.
Yeah.
Anyway, and even got his mom denouncing him. Saying like, I don't know what happened to my son. Like, I didn't raise him to be this way.
Yeah, there's nothing really like after that, but I don't know. There's some people that are like, oh wow, like I heard you got arrested. Like that's crazy. Like they believe in the media hype, and there's other people kind of taking a second look at him, just like, he got arrested for what? Like he didn't say anything like specific. He didn't reference a specific ethnic group. Why did he get arrested for that? So people are it's kind of like an eye opener for some people, like, because everyone's just like, yeah, we live in a free democratic society. We live in a free democratic society. Yet you have these people getting arrested left and right for, practicing the religion, or getting ticketed, or, trying to practice free speech, and getting arrested. And then also you have too, with all these they're talking about like vaccine passports now, where you'll have to have a passport to travel, that proves that you have a vaccine. It's absolutely ludicrous. But yeah, I don't know. There's like so many ways I can go to, like, I hope I'm not like derailing too much with your conversation, because I have.
Well, it's pretty much derailing it totally, because it's not generally, But I mean, whatever,
Just Doooovid brought it up. I didn't want to like, make it about me. I just he just brought it up, and so I just thought I'd explain what happened. Yeah.
You're not good at being concise.
What?
Don't mind me. It's okay. I'm glad I know what's going on in Canada. Oh, it's crazy, man. It's very bogus charges, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck to you and your friend.
Thanks for coming on, Ariel. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Goodbye, guys.
Bye.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well.
You take care, Ariel. Come again.
Explained it. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to do that, but yeah, I was just kind of maybe talking about other things, but Doooovid just brought it up, so I just thought I would just explain myself. So, but
it's in the news, and
yeah,
you're connected to it. I mean, you could still be more concise, but
yeah, and this like whatchamacallit, these tickets, like, okay, so basically, like, the courts right now, like, if you like really test the court system, Like, don't even plead like guilty. Don't even like pay like a speeding ticket. Like, don't
Now,
even
see,
plead guilty. Like,
John, I don't want you coming on and promoting whatever and it's some sort of an agenda here. Is this just,
oh,
you know, it's not proper.
okay.
Like, the point of coming on this show is hopefully to get smarter, but you're not taking advantage of that opportunity. You're just
What were you guys
having
talking
verbal
about before?
diarrhea.
I was actually ready to wrap up. We talked a little bit about Arya Samaj and Dayananda Saraswati's theory on Aryan revival, and Jennifer talked about a periodic table and had some new diagrams and a 3D printed model.
Oh yeah, the 3D printing. Yeah.
And then so we talked about 3D printing, and I was basically done, and then Ariel hopped on, and then you hopped on, so
Mm-hmm.
we could still wrap up, or I'm not sure if what you want to do, Jennifer, or you're streaming, I guess. So you're doing IRL activism, or you're doing streaming, or both at the same time.
Yeah, both at the same time. I feel like I'm on here just to let
It's the way to do it,
public
but
know what's
you got
going
to.
on, just because we're kind of muzzled a little bit. So,
Well, I mean, saying
yeah.
you could do streaming and IRL activism, but you don't have to become like a one-dimensional character where all you ever do is activism. So anytime you're ever talking to anybody, you're just doing your activism. You're saying you still stream and talk about different things you're researching or topics where you're not necessarily promoting your activism, because that makes for bad streaming, because most of the time people don't want to hear your activism. You need to specifically be put forward to, like, and this guy's gonna preach to you about something, and that's the whole reason he's talking to you.
Yeah, well, I hope through the activism, like, people can be more informed on their rights and how they can exercise their own sovereignty. So that's basically my angle of it. So it's like real world. Like,
What do you think
can
about
implement it.
debts, John? What do you think about debts? Do you think it's a good idea for people to get out of debt?
Absolutely.
So get out of debt. What else can people do to help themselves? They can make sure they drink enough water, make sure they get enough sleep, make sure they're not drinking too much alcohol or abusing drugs or food, and try to maybe work on getting to know themselves a little bit better, like what their weaknesses are. Like, do you head for the candy bar or the poutine when you're feeling lonely and sad? I know it can seem like there's a lot of stuff overwhelming you, and I don't like to see you consumed by that désespoir. So, little things, they do go a long way, because what you're doing is ultimately shifting your perspective to one of self-care. And, antagonizing people whose job it is to keep civil order may not be the best first step, right, John?
I doubt
It
that.
kind of sounds like it might be easy for that to become self-destructive pretty quick.
I think we need to challenge these people and hold them account for their actions. So I view it as a duty, as a calling to carry out these
all I'm saying
actions
is,
that seem to be nobody really wants to do. Actually, they want to talk about it, like, or they'll be in their basements playing video games.
Did you become all consumed, where you're saying that's your mission and that's your whole point of life, or is it just one aspect, and then you become one dimensional that anytime anybody's ever talking to you, you're like a preacher, you're going to preach to them. You don't have any other dimensions to your personality.
Well, I'm expressing myself in the moment right now and what's going through my mind and what I'm studying. So it seems like it's very fresh in my mind, and
it's the dominant. It's currently the dominant influence, but could that change tomorrow, Or are you saying like no, it's likely to be
Yeah,
the
like it
downward
seems like a
influence?
different season. Like it's a different season to me. It seems like it's more urgency with what's going on in the world, especially. Whereas before, I didn't feel like I was much urgent. Now it's just like my life has just kind of been kind of turned upside down with this kind of pandemic. So basically, there's this energy coming through me, like it's more urgent now, and it's just like I can't necessarily accept the same defaults that I have accepted before. So it seems like my perception in IRL is shifting dramatically, and then what my inner work is coming out now, and it's just like I have to express myself
I mean, you're
to
like
the
a
outside
parallel
world.
repair the world activist kind of. I mean, you're basically
Yeah,
your own version of like a Teak and Oil and repair the world.
yeah, yeah. Like I hope like it's just not like we're anti. Like there's a lot of people that they go to these protests and there's anti this, anti that. Like I don't want to necessarily come off that way, but it is good work to know your rights and to practice law in order for you to be more faith-based, because right now the system is not letting you practice your religion, practice your politics.
Hey, are you there?
Hello?
Yeah, hey.
Okay. So now I'm talking to you, just you?
I just muted John because he was just rambling. John, you got to learn how to wrap
Okay,
it
because I
up.
just figured this out. I have my TV on muted now, and now I'm just holding my phone and talking to you on the phone.
Oh, thank God you don't sound like a total freak. That's
Well, I am a total freak.
oh, okay,
But
great.
I've been listening for a while. I remember a couple of months ago, or like stayed up too late listening to you and like fucked up and almost fucked up work.
I'm sorry.
But I want to know more about your theory. I don't know. I feel like every time I tune in, it's like I just missed something, or you just danced around it, or we didn't really get there. So,
Well, it's a unified field model. It's a unified field model.
Yep.
Okay. So what is that? It's a set of rules that dictates the procession of a system. So you can apply the model on a metaphysical level, physical level, and whatever if there are other levels, you can apply it there too. But there's some basic axioms that are used depending on what you're doing. So if you're doing physics, the axioms you have to take are space-time.
Cool. Yeah, fair. All this. I'm really more interested on like where you're connecting it to reincarnation. I'm curious about more.
Well,
that aspect of it.
So the thing you have to realize with the thing to appreciate with reincarnation is like it's a great example for establishing the burden of proof. Okay, because the question is, who has the burden of proof in that conversation? As far as I'm concerned, it's the person denying reincarnation, because here's the way I frame it. It's like, does the personality have energy in it? And if it does, that energy is subject to conservation of energy. So if there's energy in the personality, then that energy is conserved. So basically, the reincarnation deniers have no answer to the question of the origin of the personality. They just ascribe it to genetic randomness. And I'm saying that the hypothesis of reincarnation is more ordered and more predictive as regards what actually happens. Otherwise, you're just stuck in the paradigm of constantly having to ascribe to like this genetic chaos of random mutations, which is the information that's not giving you any information.
I think that's that sort of angle and sort of Big Bang angle is stupid anyway, because it just doesn't really do anything or explain anything or even try to explain anything.
It's a logical
just sort of like
black
a cop
hole.
out. It's like, here's a bunch of words and have a nice one. Like
it's a logical black hole. So
yeah.
It's basically something that paralyzes your capacity to follow a logical train of thought, because the reason logic can be memorized is because you're actually memorizing the geometry of the deformations
you can
associated
logically
with it.
come to like I think the idea of God, like if you're not stumping yourself and shooting yourself in the foot, you can logically arrive at that conclusion. Logic gets you there. no problem, right? So,
I don't know. I mean, I think
well, a
it's a
creator
matter
or
of
a god
personal
or
belief.
a primary consciousness, I should say, I guess. Like, logic
Okay.
would dictate that that would be above matter, no? Consciousness?
Does logic dictate that consciousness is above matter? No, I
Or
don't think it
primary?
dictates that.
Because
It's actually
consciousness
simultaneous.
can be beyond time, can't it? But
Well,
matter can't be on time.
you have
Like
to
an
define.
ingredient to matter
No,
is time.
you have to define consciousness first. So you have to agree on a
Well,
definition of consciousness.
let's just agree on our consciousness that we use as a baseline in day-to-day conversation, not scientific or
Well, it has.
philosophic
That's
thinking.
what I'm saying. It has to be a scientific presentation of consciousness because that's how you get predictions. So I think that the preferable, from a biological standpoint, the preferable definition for consciousness is that which distinguishes life from non-life. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
I'm with you there.
if we want to make a different argument, okay, if we want to say, well, only humans are conscious, or only humans and a couple of animals that I like because reasons are conscious, but all the rest.
I don't know. I don't think
they're
that
not
either. No, I'm with you there too, because I think like if you could
That's
say that,
logically-
I would say you could say in the same way crystals are conscious in that kind of way, because it distinguishes
Well,
itself
life
from a
is
past
different.
state to a future state.
Life is different from non-life because life is self-replicating and non-life isn't. Non-life is self-similar, but that's not the same thing as self-replicating. So we can draw that distinction. And what I'm arguing is that it's a fallacy to ascribe consciousness uniquely to some subset of life, because you're never going to be able to actually draw that line and say, well, this is where consciousness starts.
That's where I really like your theory, because I sort of already had an innate kind of intuitive view. I viewed the world kind of in that way, where all the different levels of consciousness on a hierarchical kind of layout, you know, from ant to ladybug to you and me and to someone who's like, you know, a convicted rapist, you know. There is you know what I mean? Like I like the old thing, like, you know, like the good dog.
So I'm just imagining like a Swami. I'm imagining the Buddha sitting on a rock, be like, everything is the same. This lotus flower.
No, but like, you know what I mean? Like, say
rapist.
You and me, well, yes, but look, you and me, say you don't do anything wrong in this life, and maybe you come back as a dog because you did something bad. Your karma wasn't perfect. So, but you get to be a dog at like a rich people's family, and oh, good boy. But if you were a piece of shit, maybe you do come back somewhere where you fuck piece of shit, Rusty, and you get kicked by your owner. You know what I mean? Like, or you are the spider that gets squashed, or you are the spider that, you know, does the good thing. Type of, you know, organization.
Yeah, well, spider karma is real, right? But it takes us a high degree of sensitivity in the first place to understand why spider consciousness must be a thing, and why there is such a thing as one spider being more self-actualized than another, right? And that's essentially how it works.
Of course.
There's a stair-stepping between the levels of consciousness where it's like it saturates all the nodes, and then once it's full, it can transition to a higher state. And that's the idea of the quantization, is that the states are not continuous. You can't go continuously from one state to another. You have to go stepwise.
Yeah, and then the granule, I guess the granules change size on each step too, so it's a different resolution and different kind of thing you're looking at each time, no?
And that's my theory, basically, is you're looking at 14 different resolutions of the universe, because that's all there is. So on the absolute smallest scale, you have what Doovid was actually talking about before that we unfortunately didn't get a chance to get to, but he was asking about the
I think I'm falling asleep there. I think maybe I'm gonna sign off, but I'll let you keep on going and wish everyone a good week.
All right.
Okay, so thanks
coming
for
on, Doovid, and it's been a great show.
Yeah.
And thanks
I
for
like Greek salad a lot too, Doovid, by the way, FYI.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate you tuning in. So enjoy. You can ask
wait a minute, Doovid. Wait a minute. Somebody just joined that I think really wanted to talk to you. So I wasn't sure if he was going to join. I wasn't sure if he was a troll, but just before you go, maybe you
Hang
can
on, I'm gonna just check one thing. I'm gonna see if I can turn on my Bluetooth speaker, because it's a little annoying holding the phone to my face. Hang on, I'm trying to see if this will work.
So we got Michael Rothschild.
Okay, never mind. He left the meeting.
And I stay on a second. This guy, Michael Rothschild's gonna hop in.
Yeah, I still don't know if it's a troll or not. So it's unfortunately, it's a bit of a toss-up with these new guests. So I'm glad we got one person who's one new person. and one old person who seems to be somewhat keeping it together.
Was that Master again?
Master Beater? What a great screen name, not.
Can you hear me?
You're sounding pretty far away.
Okay, because I have, it's a different, I can hear you better, but you can hear me worse.
So I'm going to sign off then. Have a great week. And I guess if Michael Rothschild's real and wants to talk,
you can come back next week.
All right, back to
the
phone. Back to the phone. Sorry about that. Just new to this calling a live stream thing. Not used to it.
Well, thanks for taking the chance on this one. I really appreciate it.
I was like, why not? I listened a bunch of times, so.
Well, it's important, right? I mean, these questions are important, but if I just yak for 5 minutes, I'm probably going to lose most people's attention, so I don't want to do that.
Well, I mean, I feel like I do that all the time when I'm talking to people. I'll jump, I'll skip. I noticed the way you sort of skip in and out of tangents. I do that. You'll be talking about something kind of serious, and then you'll be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, fucking Fruity Pebbles, man." Like, so I appreciate that.
I used to know someone. She called me the master of the non sequitur.
Yeah. And speaking of my screen name, Masturbator, I used to be a DJ. That was my DJ name. That's my Instagram name still. So I just sort of kept it as my online handle. Fits.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
All my old DJ buddies call me Beater, so you can just call me Beater. You don't have to call me Masturbator. So.
I just want to figure out if this new account is a real person. Michael,
right.
Are you real? Hello? Okay, I'm just going to remove him from the meeting if he doesn't.
What is love? Baby, don't hurt.
Nice.
Oh, copyright.
You know what's funny is that there's this new feature that I can take someone out really quickly. So as long as they don't come on and start just like spouting a stream of obscenities.
Nice. Now I'm seeing on my screen here, someone's saying that I should wait a few more seconds. Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing and stuff. I'm just getting used to it, bud. Sorry, dog. Sorry, screen expert persons.
It's okay because you sound great to us. So it's not all together terrible.
Perfect. And I'm low tech as fuck, just on a phone. There you go.
You can actually do it pretty well because the phone has the advantage of a directional mic because it's engineered that way. Whereas if
I'm actually holding it like I feel like I'm just talking to someone on the phone right now. So that's how I'm doing it right now. I tried having my Bluetooth speaker so I could be hands free, but you said I sounded far away and stuff. So whatever.
Yeah, the phone it's really only good when your face is right at the mic. That's why. I mean, I guess if you get like a stand, you probably would.
Wait a minute. Actually, maybe if I well, then I still have to hold it to my face. So fuck it, whatever. I'll just I'll get a headphone at some point. Anyway.
Yeah, I just transitioned to headset myself, and I'm quite pleased with the result.
Because now I'm sitting in a different room where I don't have the screen in front of me. Because the screen in this room, it's harder to mute. Anyway, it's annoying. So I can't see anything right now.
This new setup is really annoying. It's harder to mute on the new setup. I do miss, I don't want to say I miss the old Google Hangouts because that was a real pain because you couldn't eject people. And that was a real buzzkill, you know?
People calling and just, and then you're sort of stuck with them on, I guess. So you couldn't,
pretty much. And then it's like, I got to beg them to leave. It's like, please just fuck off. They're like, no, I'm today. Literally the third guy has done that to me before. You've done it.
Wow, we've had our staff.
You've occupied my thing.
All right. Well, how do I mute? Okay. Can I be in charge of my mute? Because what if I just want to listen to you guys and I want to jump in and ask shit? Because that's I kind of want to. Sorry to be the boss and dictator, but I want you to talk about your shit more.
Okay, well, let's do it. Let's go into it. So where do we start? We want to start at the primacy of consciousness versus non-consciousness. So we need to define consciousness, okay?
Or not even. Okay, but let's say consciousness as in God's consciousness. Let's start with
undefined.
Undefined.
Here's the problem. Okay, it's like I love God. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely have an undying love of God. It's just that it doesn't. The religious approach is essentially not what I'm doing right now because people
but like you said before. Sorry to cut you off again because I'm a jerk, but like when you're talking before about like how you have to look into yourself when you're sort of studying the idea of consciousness, right? So use that example of consciousness when in the example of saying, okay, so consciousness, when saying consciousness is primary, I'm referring to my own example in my own head. I know it's not a thing I can print out and prove, but I would think that existed before any matter did in the universe. I think that my intuition points me in that direction.
Why do you think that?
Well, because I think that if the creation, if in a creationist sort of model of the universe, the creation, like the idea of the creation was before the physical creation, and part of the physical creation is time.
Creation violates causality.
Well, let's just say.
So basically, I don't have.
I mean, in a like a godlike creation sense, not a Big Bang sense. In a like a now I create this.
Yeah, but that implies that the universe is created and it's not created.
I'm saying from a creator point of view, though. If there's a creator,
if there's a creator
exists before.
If there's a creator, then you're asserting something which is demonstrably false, and therefore, if false is true, then anything is true.
What's demonstrably false though?
A created universe is demonstrably false because we're in a universe.
It could be demonstrably true in the same way it's demonstrably false.
No, you cannot prove creation.
Well, I can prove that there is a creation.
You can prove that creation is something that happened. Maybe. Yes. You can prove that
there is like a law of the universe.
Well, all I'm trying to get at is how time and matter like are super.
I think you're on the right track. You're on the right track, but you have to let go of the idea that something created the universe, because that is not what happened.
I wasn't necessarily going to lean on that. I was just using that as sort of a starting point to
talk
about
that is the starting point, and that's why I'm saying if we want to be at the right starting point, you have to realize that the matter in the universe, the mass. Let's put consciousness to the side. We can agree that mass exists, right? That mass has existed in some form.
But we can agree
forever.
It exists only in the context of observing it in a universe where we have time. So all I meant to say is before
I can
matter is that time is an
mass
ingredient of matter. You can't have matter without time. Once you zoom in,
mass
everything
can
falls
exist
apart.
without time. Mass can exist without time. The dark matter, is ageless. Dark matter does not have a measurable age. It does not experience time.
But it's not a measurable thing, really, either.
But it exists, and it's demonstrable that it exists.
It's theorized that it exists.
It's demonstrable that it exists. In the sense,
what if dark matter is just, say I have a bowling ball on one side of the table in one moment in time, and then I have the same bowling ball at the other end of the table in another moment in time. Maybe what the dark matter is just that all the matter is accounted for beyond time, and it just looks like everything is everywhere.
There's dark matter because light is a high energy state, and the universe prefers low energy states. So most of it is going to be in a dark state because it takes more energy to go into a light state. And so since entropy is true, you're going to have the majority.
Well, dark matter doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have light. It just means that we don't.
That is the definition.
Well, the definition really only implies that it's unaccountable matter that must be there. So we don't really know the characteristics of whatever light waves.
Go outside at night. Go outside at night and look into the sky and tell me what color it is. It's black as night, and that's where the saying "black as night" comes from. In fact,
well, I know that.
So the assertion is that you have all this matter in the universe. You have a bunch of matter in the universe, and we don't know what matter is. Okay, so matter is everything. We're just going to say matter is everything, and everything is going to be something involving matter, but we don't know what.
I'm going to say that I still think that matter has something. Time has something to do with matter. I don't think that math.
It does. I don't know. I'm getting to that. I can literally tell you where time arises.
I'm a cook, by the way, just so you know.
I can prove to you why it's confusing is because the time doesn't arise on the same level as causality does, as space-time does. So there's two levels of causality, and time arises on the second one, or third or fourth, depending on where you start, right? Because it's a nested thing. It's just a nesting that goes on and on and on forever.
Well, it's a circular, it's a cyclical thing, yeah.
So you can cycle because the bottom is also the top, right? So you can go to the bottom, and from the bottom you can get back up to the
Yeah,
top.
it's
because
like
the
a Mobius
mechanisms are the
strip. You
same.
can cycle on the Mobius strip and be in two places in the same place, but
No,
at different
no,
times.
you can't. No, well, you can
Well,
be
you know
in
what I
this.
mean. You know what I mean. On you're on one side, like the ant on the Escher's thing there, right? So, but when you're on the upside or the downside, you're really on the same place on the strip, but you're on the different side, right?
The important thing to realize here is that in a black hole, time doesn't exist because there's no
Yeah.
way to measure time in that situation.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's the
time,
thing. I think the black hole can be like,
you got to not interrupt me so much because it's like
Sorry.
really important that I be able to finish. So the important thing here is that time is localized. So the time here is 4 billion years approximately, and that's only here. So anywhere else in the universe has no connection. Well, it has a connection, but it's not the same time interval. So other places define their time intervals completely differently, but the clear distinction is that our galaxy has not existed forever. Do we agree on that?
that our galaxy has not existed forever.
Yeah.
I'm
Multiple
totally cool
galaxies.
agreeing with that. Yeah.
And the other galaxies also haven't existed forever, but may not have started at the same point.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what does it mean to talk about time between different galaxies? Well, it's essentially there is
kind
no
of
beginning.
meaningless?
There's no. It's not that it's meaningless. It's just that
Yeah.
there's no beginning to universal time. So T naught universe is undefined. T naught universe, because matter exists, it's
Mhm.
always existed because our universe doesn't allow for creation. So everything that's happening is in
But
some
what do you
sense
what
a
do you mean when you
transmutation.
say what do you mean when you say our universe doesn't allow for creation? So there's
Our universe is subject to conservation laws. And one of those conservation laws is that energy can't be created or destroyed. So for there to be creation happening anywhere in the universe would imply our laws of physics were breaking down, which are the
Yeah.
very things that our existence is predicated on. Like if the laws of physics weren't in any way breakable, we'd be dead because the break in the laws of physics, we'd not survive that. If it was a big enough break, like if gravity just suddenly like got 10 times bigger, we'd all be crushed like
Mhm.
ants.
But that's and to be specific and precise, that's you mean like creation as in everything was in one point and then expanded outward or whatever, Big Bang kind of creation, like from nothing to something, right? That's what you mean by creation?
That's one version of a creation.
Okay, because yeah, I don't like that
But
creation
you
either,
could,
though.
there are
Even
other
yeah,
creation stories, right? And that's the
I-
thing, that they're stories because the real universe has no mechanism that accepts that type of thing from happening.
hmm Well, that's the thing. If God and the universe are the same thing, it's definitely that component, the untangible part. I think is potentially obviously existed forever. I mean, if it's something that's beyond time, it's the word forever is almost meaningless. But you know what I mean, right? Like outside of time, before and after, always kind of existing, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, so I'd say like the universal time is infinity because the universe has always existed, but the localized time is 4 point whatever billion years because we could say created because it does sort of look like a creation from the perspective of physics, but it's really a formation. We
Mhm.
were formed, there was some dark matter, and then the dark matter converged in such a way that it formed the sun and the planets. And this is like an explosion in space that's precipitated spontaneously through gravitational collapse and facilitated through something called the Pauli exclusion principle or uncertainty principle.
Mhm.
But basically, like, are you familiar with the Pauli exclusion principle?
Ring my bell a bit about it. Like I said, I'm a cook, so
Two
maybe not.
fermions can't be in the same quantum state.
Why not? And what's the more familiar? What is this? The principle? What does the principle
It's
say?
the Pauli exclusion principle,
Okay.
and that is the most that's the most normal version of it that I can think of. But yeah, the Pauli exclusion, the best example of the Pauli exclusion principle, which is that two fermions can't occupy the same quantum state, is the idea with chemistry how there's valence shells. So I don't know if you know any chemistry, but in atoms, there's 2 electrons in the first layer, and then there's 8, and then there's 8, and then there's 18. I don't know if this is familiar to you, but the reason for that,
It's ringing a bell. Yeah, I
the
sponge
reason-
up a lot of stuff.
the reason that is the way it is because of the Pauli exclusion principle. It's because there's only so many spaces for electrons and protons to go, and they shell up. They don't continuously deform. They deform in a stepwise fashion, i.e., from hydrogen to helium to lithium to beryllium, and then you're just counting like a staircase up that way.
Okay.
So the Pauli exclusion principle operates, it's the same reason that you have the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which is that there's a canonical conjugation relation between certain sets of variables like energy and time or position and momentum. That's the same operating principle because what you're having is a waveform going through a really small thing, i.e. a slit, and then having some tangible effect to the distribution of the waveform, because your basic approach is that everything is a waveform, and essentially the way we look at things is a bunch of waveforms, so like bubbles, kind of, and the bubbles can't pop, and the bubbles can go through doorways that are smaller than the bubbles are. Okay, that makes sense?
Yes.
So when you're looking at, have you heard of the single slit experiment?
Yeah. I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
So you're aware that you take something that is without the slit, it's always registering in the same place, but as soon as you impose that slit, it's registering in multiple places.
Yeah.
over
And
a
the way I
period of
understand
time.
that is that because it's sort of quote unquote squeezes through and bounces and maybe changes its
Well, nobody
vector.
really knows. Nobody really knows. So and
Whatever.
I'm
something
just
with the
trying to.
slit interferes and causes an interference pattern, because I guess the thing that doesn't split up somehow changes its behavior after it interacts with the slit, right? It bounces off itself or
Think
whatever.
about, okay, have you ever blown a bubble? You know those like toys?
Yes. No.
Okay.
Can't
Yeah,
say.
you're a very sad child, eh? Never got to have any bubbles.
I had a stick, okay? That's it.
Bubble phobia.
Okay, so you know when you first
Afraid of
blow it,
bubbles.
there's like a wave front that sort of travels on it, and it's not quite a perfect sphere, but then eventually it relaxes to a perfect sphere because the sphere is maximum entropy state, and everything's always seeking to go to the maximum entropy state. But when you first blow it, because there's that pressure from your blowing, it's creating a distortion to the wavefront. So coming back to the uncertainty principle, if we have a really small slit and you have an unpoppable bubble, the action of it going through a really small slit is going to cause that same type of distortion like when you're blowing a bubble and it's not quite a sphere yet. And that's why you get a distribution. But the crazy thing is that quantum mechanically, these random quote unquote collapses still have a high degree of regularity because they form these incredibly regular distributions. So you can always look
like a wave pattern would exactly right? So
and that's what we want to do is through philosophy, we want to nail down mechanically what is exactly happening and what is the best metaphor for it. And that's why physics is lost, because they're not using good metaphors. Because you want a metaphor like you're a cook, you want to be able to sink your teeth into a metaphor.
Exactly. I'm a cook, and I like to also play a lot of sim racing, a lot of video game racing, and I think I think the philosophy of racing is really helpful too. I don't know if that's going to sound retarded right off its
It's not
face,
retarded. You know why? Because the consciousness is light mediated, and light travels at 3 times 10 to the 8. So
well, yeah. Here's why I think you'll agree. This racing is like it's the objective is clear. It's all the rules are agreed upon by all parties. And that's what you're doing. You know what I mean? So what the racing line is very clear. What's the fastest way through this issue in front of me? Whether it's a set of corners or a hill or a thing, you know, and like philosophy wise too, like a postmodernist will say you can take any corner at any speed because anything is possible. But someone who actually has experience racing will go, no, you can't actually take every corner at any speed. That's not practical and unfeasible. So yeah, I don't know. I like to use everyday science.
Well, there is no everyday science for what's really happening on the actual base physics level. It's a saturation of microstates. It's not something that has a material analog. So it's extremely to actually get your head around the real mechanism of what's happening is like it's not easy, but it's important to make sure that at every step of the reasoning process you understand what is being said, right?
Mhm.
Because if you don't agree with what I'm putting forward, then it's going to sort of stick on that. So do you agree about the sphere being the maximum entropy?
No, I think that's the thing. I agree with all these little things. It's just that the jump between the reason I really wanted to like actually make contact was that I was like, fuck, okay, where's the connection between the reincarnating and the unified field model? That's what I wanted to. I wanted to really. I wanted to see those particles connected.
Reincarnation is simply a consequence of conservation of energy. So to deny reincarnation is to assert that that your subjective consciousness has no energy in it, and I don't think that position is a defensible position.
But what if I think that my consciousness, that my biological body is tuning into my consciousness? What if there is another side to all this? Pardon me?
I'll tell you physiologically what happens. So there's mommy and daddy have a special date night and watch Netflix, and
not for
5
me.
weeks later, 5 weeks later, there's a little mini fetus, and when the heartbeat starts, that means that consciousness.
More like mommy and ex-daddy.
That means that a consciousness has synchronized to.
What if I had two daddies?
Okay, guys, are we going to talk about this?
No, I'm kidding. Sorry.
Kick John out.
Rory.
No, but continue, because I still don't like. Yes.
Think of your consciousness when you die as you're an old guy, and then he croaks, and then your consciousness is still there, and then it decays into a tiny little seed, and then
in my body or where?
It just floats away due to. I think you could probably go wherever you want it because it's just a resonance thing.
So like 28 grams type shit you're talking about, or whatever the movie was called. Was it 28 grams?
I'm not familiar with a movie called
like
28 grams.
I think it's Sean Penn. He dies and then his body loses 28 grams. The number, it might not be 28 grams. I might be mixing it up with 28 days later. It might be like 14.
I've heard that before. Or the never mind.
Yeah, maybe now you're thinking about 28 days later.
Yeah.
Oops. Oops, I unleashed zombies by mistake again.
What's your thought on the butterfly effect?
It's not a thing. Sorry.
Not a thing. Like you can have a dream within a dream.
But that's not what the butterfly effect is.
Isn't the butterfly effect like you butterfly flaps his wings and then you get a monsoon or something?
No, it was actually like a movie. It was like a guy, he can have a dream and then like he's playing out. It's like you can be conscious in your dream.
That is not what that movie was. John, that's not what that movie was about. Are you thinking of Inception?
No, Inception, yes. Sorry, I got my movies mixed up. Yes.
I like how now we're all just talking about movies, but wrongly. Like we're all mistaken about the movies.
Oh, fuck, that's hilarious. Okay, so hang on. But yeah, Inception was fucking awesome. A sidebar. That was a good movie. So, what was the question about Inception? Is that possible? Is it? I've had people dream about me. And I've definitely had dream connections with people, for sure.
Yeah. What are dreams?
Yeah.
Okay, so the way dreams work is that when you're awake, you have an impulse to project an I am, i.e., you're spontaneously compelled to project selfness. It's a survival mechanism. So the way that your blob of flesh stays alive is to believe that it exists, which is obviously like where the whole self-creation thing comes from.
Sure.
But this eventually has a burnout effect on the primary mediator of consciousness, which is the brain. And so the brain, it's basically getting slow motion microwaved by your thinking during the day. Not microwave, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Electromagnetized.
Yeah. Zapped,
motherfucker. So
radar love, motherfucker.
here's what sleep does. Sleep inhibits the projection of I am, which leaves blackness.
A disembodied.
It moves energy from your consciousness out of your brain. That's the point of sleep. Why? So your brain can recover from the battering it took during the whole day you spent using it to simulate your existence.
So it has to sort of flush the RAM and then refurbish
No,
it.
it's basically like it has to, like, okay, think about it. If you got burned, what do you have to do? You know, put some fucking cream on that shit, wait a few days, you know, to keep it out of the sun.
If I get burned, I usually just have a cigarette and go back to work. So there's that.
Do you also stay up really late for no reason?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I see a pattern there.
Yeah. What time is it now? It's probably.
Yeah, that's the main. That's. I mean, so. Yeah, it looks like my OBS is having trouble, but it's